deeper. This is why climate justice starts with gender justice. And gender justice is about achieving gender equality across the board and in leadership positions. We know very well that women bring to the table. We know that women's leadership is directly associated with increased transparency on climate impact and leads to better resource governance and conservation outcomes. Yet, according to the IPU data, the global share of women in parliament is 26.7%, presenting an increase of 0.4 percentage points in a year. At this rate, parity will not be achieved for nearly 60 years. I am very proud for being a parliamentarian from Mexico, one of the 6 countries in the world with parity, and also to be here in a country with parity that is the great host of the COP28. So let me briefly mention 3 key elements essential from parliaments to put gender equality at the center of climate solutions. I am proud to say that these key elements stem from deliberations on gender-responsive climate action held among MPs, especially in the framework of IPU's Parliamentary Meeting at the Commission of the Status of Women held last year. First, parliaments need to transform themselves into true gender-sensitive institutions so they can ensure the development of gender-sensitive climate policies. What does this mean? This means that women in all diversity are equally represented, and their internal policies, such as quotas, are in place for gender parity in leadership across all the committees. Second, climate-related policies must enhance women's autonomy and ensure their access to information and to financial and technical resources so they can contribute more equally to solutions. Research shows that 1.5% of overseas climate-related development assistance identified gender equality as a primary objective. So against this backdrop, we must ensure that funds not only become available, but also accessible to all. The operationalization of the loss and damage found in the first days of this COP28 must be in this spirit, with parliaments at the center of the debate, and gender equality targets duly embedded. Third, we need to ensure that women and youth leaders are the forefront of international, national, and local discussions on climate solutions. We need to promote to ensure the meaningful inclusion of women-led and youth-led civil society organizations in policy making and enable a true intergenerational dialogue among members of parliament and between social groups. So I look forward to the deliberation of today's debate and to continue working with all of you to keep this process alive and meaningful beyond the COP. It's a pleasure to be here in this country. Thanks for your host. Thanks for your warmness. And thank you, all of you parliamentarians all around the world, to have time to come here and work together against climate change and have some solutions. I feel very happy to be here with Dan, sharing this forum with you at COP28. Thank you so much.
شكرا للسيدة سينتيا لوبيز كاسترو على ملاحظاتك وعلى تسليط الضوء على بعض الأعمال الملهمة التي تقوم بها البرلمانيات من خلال الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي. أدعو الآن السيد دان كاردن رئيس مكتب منتدى البرلمانيين الشباب للاتحاد البرلماني الدولي لإلقاء كلمته.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dan Carden. I'm the Member of Parliament for Liverpool Walton and President of Young Parliamentarians here at the IPU. Fellow parliamentarians, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, can I start by thanking our hosts, the UAE National Federal Council, for their excellent, warm embrace and welcome to this year's COP for all parliamentarians. It is my great pleasure to join you today to represent my fellow young parliamentarians from around the world. For decades, scientists and activists have been warning us about the existential threat posed by the increased concentration of carbon in our atmosphere. And today, we are living with its impact. In Pakistan, floods have affected 33 million people and caused more than $30 billion in damage. And for the last 3 years, a devastating drought has ravaged the Horn of Africa, where the agony of starvation claims one life every 28 seconds. These catastrophes were not inevitable. Decisions and political calculations have exacerbated their severity. And there is a perverse irony to it all, that climate change is unevenly felt and it is also unevenly caused. As people in climate vulnerable societies see their worlds collapse around them, oil companies post record profits, industrialized countries continue to reap the economic benefits of burning fossil fuels, and the wealthiest continue to unsustainably consume. It is not enough to speak only about ways to minimize the future effects of climate change. We must now deliver on the loss and damage which rising temperatures are causing worldwide. And it requires redressing historical injustices. Developed economies have the ability and the moral responsibility to shoulder the cost incurred by the most climate-affected nations. At the Paris Accords in 2015, countries in the global north reasserted their commitment to mobilize $100 billion in climate finance by 2020. We are now 3 years past that deadline, and only $83 billion has been raised in climate financing. And what's worse is that of the funds that have been mobilized, they've disproportionately come in the form of loans with high interest rates and unreasonable conditions. And they have hoovered up money from existing development schemes. So I urge my fellow parliamentarians to support the new Loss and Damage Fund under the UNFCCC, a proposed initiative that will establish the financial architecture necessary to fund vital mitigation strategies. A fund that is led by the principles of those climate-affected nations themselves, and not a repeat of the colonial era diktats that inflicted so much damage, particularly on indigenous communities. One of the key lessons of past global climate gatherings is that promises are simply not enough if countries later fail to deliver on them. As the Global Stocktake report shows, we are not on track to keep the global increase in temperature to below 1.5 degrees Celsius, the central target agreed at the Paris Accords. As a new generation of leadership begins to take center stage, our discussions become endowed with a sense of urgency to avoid catastrophe, and our actions become more radical and transformative. Parliamentarians have a distinct role to play in this broader effort. Last year, hundreds of us gathered in Sharm el-Sheikh for the 8th Global Conference of Young Parliamentarians under the banner Young MPs for Climate Action. We met in the lead up to COP27, and our contributions were firmly included in its deliberations. Here we called for using our powers to ensure that developed countries commit to climate financing for the developing world. Parliaments to hold governments to account to meet the Paris Agreement goal of limiting temperatures to 1.5 degrees. And we called for young MPs to be leaders in our own parliaments, to cut emissions and be role models for our communities. And finally, we called for young MPs to amplify the voices of youth and women within our countries so that their needs and interests and solutions are integrated into laws and actions at all stages of the political process. Later today, at a special event in the Blue Zone, we will be joined by women, youth, and be talking about climate action. This marks for the first time the IPU hosting an event at the Blue Zone in collaboration with the Federal National Council of the United Arab Emirates, to whom I would like to express my sincere gratitude for their dedication to both the IPU and youth empowerment. It will allow us to engage with representatives from governments, international organisations, civil society, and women and youth activists later this afternoon. Our aim is to make these parliamentary exchanges a permanent fixture for COP meetings. And I want to finish by saying that I wish to focus my term of office here on tackling the scourge of unemployment worldwide. And as parliamentarians, we can push our governments to deliver on green education, training, and green employment opportunities for the jobs of the future, to tackle the corrosive effect of youth unemployment across the globe while meeting the important climate commitments that will be made here over the next few days. Thank you very much for listening to me, and enjoy the rest of COP. Thank you.
My Parliament, my planet. My name is the Honourable Pia Glover Roll. I am Member of Parliament in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Climate change is affecting our country in a major way. It's a very serious existential threat to our nation because we're a very low-lying country. We were faced in 2019 by the worst storm in our history, which was Hurricane Dorian. Many of our islands are still in recovery mode. It has affected our country in terms of billions of dollars in debt. We are seeking to lead an advocacy in our region in terms of climate change, in terms of finding funds for loss and damage, and in terms of being ready to recover if a storm of this nature comes again, which we know is possible in the future. Our Parliament is seeking to enact legislation that speaks to climate change and biodiversity using best practices from countries around the world who would have already enacted legislation. Climate change being an existential threat to the Bahamas and something that we have to prepare for is something that is critical in our Parliament and something that our Prime Minister is advocating for and leading the way in the region in his position as the chair of CARICOM, where we're seeking to engage other nations for best practices and other nations for support as we seek funding, as we seek recovery efforts, and as we seek support with best practices in legislation from countries that have already experienced existential threats like hurricanes and climate change.
سيذكر التاريخ البرلماني هذه المناسبة طويلاً، فنحن في ماراثون عمل لا يصدق. الجميع يشارك، الجميع يتفاعل، الجميع في حالة نقاش مثمر يتطلع إلى الخروج بنتائج حقيقية تسهم في تحقيق قفزة نوعية في العمل البرلماني البيئي. الجلسة التالية هي استكمال للنقاشات الجارية حول الفرص والتحديات في مساءلة الحكومات بشأن الخسائر والأضرار الناجمة عن التدهور البيئي، ومحاولة وضع لبنة جديدة في مساعي إيجاد مصادر للتمويل وكيفية ترتيب أولويات الإنفاق لعلاج المشاكل البيئية. أترككم الآن مع جلسة ما بعد التخفيف من الآثار والتكيف، تفعيل الآلية للخسائر والضرر. وأدعو الآن مديرة الجلسة السيدة ديونيسا تيودورا عضو البرلمان اليوناني إلى اعتلاء المنصة، وكذلك أعضاء الجلسة.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to moderate this next session called Beyond Mitigation and Adaptation, Operationalizing Loss and Damage. This is an extremely timely session on loss and damage because, as you may know, there was a breakthrough agreement that was just reached at the start of this COP here in Dubai to establish the Loss and Damage Fund. This follows the initial agreement to set up this fund last year in COP27 in Egypt. Since a long time now, there has been calls to create such a fund from developing countries in particular who are on the frontiers of the climate change and experiencing irreversible damage. In this session, we are going to discuss the growing importance of the loss and damage mechanism in the face of the rising cost with climate change. We will also look at how funding can be appropriately and effectively channeled to support loss and damage, and how we parliamentarians in both developed and developing countries can use our budgetary powers to support this new established fund. We will have the opportunity to hear from leading experts and parliamentarians from all over the world in order to understand how climate losses are being felt on the ground in their countries and what is needed to make sure that the Loss and Damage Fund is operationalized in a way that benefits the most vulnerable people in a fair and equitable way. In the last part of this session, we plan to have time for you delegates to take the floor. As mentioned previously, we ask you to please fill out the request to take the floor form and submit it to the dedicated staff prior to the discussion. We will do our best to accommodate as many requests as possible, and I would like to remind you that you will have only 2 minutes maximum to taking the floor. I will also announce the list when the list is closed based on the time which is available for us. I would now like to welcome our first panelist, Mrs. Elena Manenkova. Mrs. Manenkova is the Deputy Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization and a leading expert in the field of climate and weather science. Mrs. Manenkova, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting World Meteorological Organization once again to share with the parliamentaries our insights and to help you in your very important legislation work It's not first time for me to speak to the Parliamentary Union delegates. I started in Lima first time, and on several occasions I had a chance to contribute. This is my 17th COP right now, and in a row. And World Meteorological Organization was actually in the inception of the UNFCCC process from its very beginning, and it is a parent body to IPCC, whose chair Jim Ski was talking to you earlier today. In my very short intervention, I will do my best to try to contribute most substantively into your thoughts and considerations regarding loss and damage. I guess I would be expected to speak about irreversible changes which already happened in the climate system, but I would really like to always make emphasis on the so much new damage which can be prevented if we are taking right action as soon as possible. You probably heard that WMO have released recently these days during COP its State of Climate report on the current year, 2023. It's still provisional, but everyone is already talking that it's going to be the warmest year. We're expecting 1.4 mean average surface temperature for this year. But what's more important for us is to look at a little bit in a longer term perspective, because the climate varies year after year. And now we have an El Nino regime, which is warming climate very much. And we had just over several years of La Nina, which is cooling effect. So in order for us to avoid these ups and downs, WMO consistently produces decadal reports. And we also just released yesterday the results of the last decade. And no surprise, it was the warmest decade from the beginning of record. And I would like to highlight a few key climate indicators which are very worrisome for us and should as well be worrisome for all countries and parliamentaries all over the world. Besides the warming temperature of the land, we are also warming the ocean. And ocean consumes 90% of the energy excess, and also ocean consumes 25% of excessive CO2, which means that ocean getting warmer, and it's also getting more acid, which implicates a lot ecosystems, and especially so vulnerable surrounding the small island states and the coastal regions. We also have seen an increased rate of the sea level, which is rising now 4.5 millimeters per year. Multiply by 10, it is 4.5 centimeters per year, and so on and so forth. And each increase of sea level creates additional risks into coastal areas, into small islands, and lowlanders. And this risk is clearly recognized in IPCC's assessment report, so it's much more intense than it was before. But also we are extremely concerned with accelerated rate of the melting of our glaciers. On the last decade, in average, we are losing 1 meter of ice on the glaciers worldwide every year. Just last 2 years, Alps, Switzerland lost 10% of the remaining glaciers they have, which already melted considerably. We are losing even our reference glaciers, which we use to monitor the state of the glaciers. We have already lost some. We know that by the end of 2030, we would lose equatorial glaciers in Papua and in Indonesia. A few years later, in the next decade, we will definitely lose glaciers in the Mount of Kenya and later Kilimanjaro. So by now, we have already lost 200,000 glaciers all over, not just for this decade from the post-industrial, in Europe, Africa, Oceania, Asia, and America. Why I'm concentrating on that? Because glaciers are water towers of the world. They give fresh water to billions of people, and the risks associated with the extensive loss of glaciers' water is already seen now, not just the downstream in the mountains communities, but much further down to the oceanic states and to the coastal areas, because this contributes to the sea level, to the level of the sea. So interconnections of these indicators and phenomena is so apparent to us. And we would like this to be apparent to you also. From our perspective, just one Sustainable Development Goal 13 to tackle climate risks and climate problems is not enough. We have to look at the things in the perspective. So therefore, WMO traditionally sharing with you the physical state of climate on physical parameters started being more and more about and what happens because of that. What happens to health, what happens to disasters, what happens to food and to water. I would like to bring your attention to the recent report of WMO on water resources, global water resources, and there is not very good news there either. The freshwater storage globally is actually changing also quite fast, and most of the northern hemisphere would really suffer from the water deficit. I do not have time to go into details right now, but I just want to flag this information for your further attention. We are talking at this COP especially intensely about renewable energy and energy transformation. And just yesterday in the presidential event, we were talking about be careful because energy infrastructure requires lots of fresh water. And there is always be the trade-offs between water you use in the energy systems or water you use for irrigation, for food security. It's absolutely necessary to take water into consideration when the countries are planning their actions. And I should finish my part of the input and introduction by talking about early warnings, about disasters, about saving people's lives. We were very pleased to see that the last decade we lost much less people than in the previous decades because we believe our early warning systems work. We haven't registered any disaster over the last decade which would kill 10,000 or more people. But even below 10,000, even 1,000 it's unexcusable loss. For us, it's too much. So therefore, we are very happy that even in the COP process, the early warning for role and the need for protecting lives everywhere is so prominent. Can we do this technically? Yes, we can. For WMO, early warning systems is not a new business. We are in this business from the beginning of times, 150 years essentially. But what is problematic for WMO, that we realize that in 50% of countries, those systems do not cover all vulnerable and all those who have a risk to die. They don't. 50% of countries, this is unacceptable. Why is that so? We are not even capable to cope with the disasters which are already there. These droughts and floods and storms, tropical, we know that. But now with the climate change, these disasters are becoming more frequent, more intense, more severe, and they come to the places which are not seen than before. Last decade, we realized that most people die really from the heat stress, something which was not in the radar screens before. So we need to have multi-hazard early warning system. In your countries, the weather services and hydrological services are very capable to do so. And WMO global system assists everybody to have the best possible forecast available anywhere. We do this. But it's not sufficient just to have access to this. It's necessary that these institutions are, by legislation, are placed on the right place in your country. So people have to know who is authoritative voice, who to listen, that is to say. We have just released, and I'm coming to the end, the report on global mortalities and economic loss, just something which lays on the surface. Most lives are lost in developing countries and in least developed countries, and most economic losses are in developed countries. When we look at who reported, we were actually shocked to see that from the LDCs, least developed states, only 13% of disasters we know about have reported economic loss or some loss. And in small islands, only 38% reported. So is it that they don't lose anything? Yes, they do. But in some cases, in the small islands, one disaster can take more than 100% of GDP away in just one go. So that is magnitude of the risk which they bear. So, dear participants, I probably have too many thoughts to share with you, but I just wanted you to think on the loss and damage, not only from the perspective what we have already irreversibly lost, but also from the perspective how much we can save in the future so that we would lose less. And for us in WMO, losing lives is absolutely unacceptable. There couldn't be a tag attached to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very informative presentation. At this moment, I would like to thank all the national delegations that have submitted the request to take the floor. There has been an enormous amount of requests. The topic is so interesting, and unfortunately now we have to close the floor in order we cannot really take more announcements. But hopefully we'll have the chance to come back to the parliamentary delegations later on. I would now like to pass the floor to Mr. Karim Darwish, who is a member of the Egyptian House of Representatives. Mr. Darwish was also the rapporteur for the outcome document at the last parliamentary meeting at COP28, organized in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Mr. Darwin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. سعادة النائبة الموقرة ديونيسينا ثيودورا مديرة الجلسة، السيدات والسادة أعضاء فريق المناقشة، الزملاء الأعزاء، يسعدني في مستهل كلمتي أن أعرب عن اعتزازي بوجودي بين هذه النخبة من البرلمانيين والمتخصصين في قضيتنا الوجودية الأولى، قضية تغير المناخ. كما أود أن أتقدم بوافر التقدير والامتنان إلى سكرتارية الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي والأشقاء في المجلس الوطني الاتحادي الإماراتي على ما بذلوه ويبذلونه من جهود دؤوبة لتيسير انعقاد أعمال اجتماعاتنا الحيوية والمهمة في توقيتها الهام. كما أشكر أشقائنا في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة على التنظيم النموذجي لمؤتمر كوب 28 وعلى كرم الضيافة وحفاوة الاستقبال. الحضور الكريم، من المؤكد أن اجتماعاتنا البرلمانية المنتظمة على هامش قمم المناخ باتت تشكل آلية حوارية شديدة الأهمية نحمل من خلالها قلق وشواغل شعوبنا من التداعيات الخطيرة والمتنامية لظاهرة تغير المناخ، والتي باتت تدق ناقوس الخطر لسلامة كوكبنا ومجتمعاتنا. ولعلكم تتفقون معي أن تحقيق العدالة المناخية يجب أن يتبوأ أولوية قصوى في مناقشاتنا لمواجهة تلك الظاهرة، كونه يتعلق بمصير مؤلم وكارثي تواجهه الدول النامية والمجتمعات أشد فقرا على وجه الخصوص. وبحسب المنظمة العالمية للأرصاد الجوية فقد تسببت الأحوال الجوية القاسية على مدار 50 عاما الماضية في خسائر اقتصادية تزيد عن 4.3 تريليون دولار ووفاة أكثر من 2 مليون شخص كان يعيش 90% منهم في الدول النامية. وعلى سبيل المثال للحصر، يواجه أشقائنا في شرق أفريقيا ومنطقة الساحل الأفريقي موجات جفاف شديدة أفضت إلى مستويات كارثية من انعدام الأمن الغذائي، كما رأينا أيضا الفيضانات المدمرة التي ضربت باكستان وليبيا الشقيقة. الزميلات العزيزات والزملاء الأعزاء، لطالما رأت الدولة المصرية في ظاهرة تغير المناخ خطرا وجوديا يجابه الإنسانية جمعاء بكل قسوة، وفي هذا الإطار فقد انخرطت مصر في جميع الجهود والأنشطة الدولية لمجابهة تلك الظاهرة الأكثر خطورة عالميا، وارتكزت الرؤية المصرية على ضرورة تعزيز المبادئ البيئية الحاكمة للعمل الدولي متعدد الأطراف لمواجهة تغير المناخ، وعلى رأسها مبدأ المسؤولية المشتركة متباينة الأعباء بين الدول النامية والدول المتقدمة. أكرر مرة أخرى، على رأسها مبدأ المسؤولية المشتركة متباينة الأعباء بين الدول النامية والدول المتقدمة، بالنظر إلى المسؤولية التاريخية للدول المتقدمة عن الوصول للوضع البيئي المتدهور حاليا. وفي هذا الإطار ترى مصر ضرورة تحقيق التوازن بين الجهد المبذول من قبل كافة الدول من ناحية، والدعم المطلوب توجيهه للدول النامية من جهة أخرى، وإيلاء أهمية خاصة للتكيف مع الآثار الكارثية المترتبة على تغير المناخ. وقد توج الجهد المصري في هذا الشق شديد الأهمية بإحداث الرئاسة المصرية لقمة المناخ كوب 27 بشرم الشيخ اختراقا نوعيا بإنشاء صندوق الخسائر والأضرار، وهو الاتفاق الذي بني عليه وبنى عليه الأشقاء في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة إبان رئاستهم الحالية لقمة المناخ كوب 28 عبر تبني قرار تفعيل الصندوق، مما يمثل خطوة شديدة الأهمية باتجاه توفير التمويل للدول النامية لتنفيذ حلول مناخية والتعامل مع خسائر وأضرار التغير المناخي وإرساء العدالة المناخية. كما أيضا وبالتوازي مع التحركات المصرية على المستوى الدولي، فقد تبنت مصر رؤية وطنية أرصت من خلالها مقاربة شاملة في مواجهة ظاهرة التغير المناخ، يأتي في مقدمتها إحداث تغير بنيوي في مزيج الطاقة عبر تعزيز الاستفادة من مصادر الطاقة المتجددة وإطلاق الاستراتيجية الوطنية للهيدروجين الأخضر، والتي تهدف مصر من خلالها إلى أن تصبح واحدة من رواد العالم في إنتاجه. وفي هذا الإطار يتبنى مجلس النواب المصري نهجا برلمانيا رائدا في مكافحة ظاهرة تغير المناخ والتحول نحو الطاقة المتجددة، يتمثل في امتلاكه منظومة تشريعية متكاملة تخلق بيئة جاذبة ومهيئة للاستثمارات في مجال الطاقة المتجددة، واستراتيجية متكاملة للتحول إلى برلمان أخضر ومستدام، فضلا عن دوره الرقابي على سياسات الحكومة المصرية في مكافحة ظاهرة تغير المناخ وتداعياتها على المستويين الإقليمي والعالمي. ختاما، ونحن في هذه الجلسة المهمة، دعونا نتفق على ضرورة أن تكون هناك خطوات متسارعة ومتلاحقة تبني على ما تم إنجازه بشأن صندوق الخسائر والأضرار، وهنا يكون دورنا كبرلمانيين جوهريا بوصفنا المعبرين عن صوت وشواغل شعوبنا ومجتمعاتنا التي تترقب بكل قلق وخوف الآثار المدمرة والكارثية لتغير المناخ، عبر ممارسة المزيد من الضغوط على الحكومات من أجل الإسراع في تفعيل صندوق الخسائر والأضرار، بحيث تترجم الالتزامات الدولية إلى تحركات ملموسة تدعم بشكل عاجل الدول النامية والمجتمعات الأكثر فقرا من خلال الوفاء بالالتزامات التمويلية وتعزيز الاستثمارات المناخية في قطاعات الطاقة المتجددة. إن كل جهد نبذله وكل حل ندفع به باتجاه هذا الحل إنما يشكل خطوة جادة إذا أمان واستقرار شعوبنا ومجتمعاتنا في عالم غير مستقر. أشكر حضراتكم على حسن الاستماع، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darwish, for these very insightful remarks. Please now allow me to move to the next panelist in this session, Mr. Daniela Fusimalohi, who is a member of the Legislative Assembly of Tonga.
My fellow parliamentarians, greetings from Tonga and greetings from the Tonga Legislative Assembly. Today I wish to speak on 2 points. One on Tonga's position as one of the countries at the very front line of climate change, and secondly, on on the fund, on the loss and damage fund, and why it should be operationalized as soon as possible. On Tonga's situation, Tonga is one of the most vulnerable small island countries in the world and is highly susceptible to the adverse impact of climate change and natural disasters. Among the top 10 countries in the World Risk Index report of 2021, 8 of them are in the Pacific, and third on the index is Tonga. And this is due to the high exposure to extreme events due to climate change. Let me give you some figures on Tonga's situation. 84% of Tonga's population live within 1 kilometer of the coast, and therefore vulnerable to rising sea levels, which is expected to be up to 35 centimeters by the year 2050. We are also affected by more frequent and intensive tropical cyclones. And over the past 9 years, Tonga has been hit by 7 major tropical cyclones and decimating communities and their livelihoods. Tonga is also ranks as first in climate-related losses as a percentage of GDP, and in 2018, according to the Global Climate Risk of 2020. It is estimated that an average economic loss as a result of disaster in Tonga is almost 20% of GDP. A cyclone is likely to inflict damage equivalent to 60% of GDP. And in the next 50 years, Tonga has a 50% chance of experiencing event loss in excess of 30% of GDP. And the latest figures was 2018. Tonga is also estimated to be 1.5 billion in deficit on our infrastructure, and we have to be built back to resilient standards. One of the issues in talking about the funds is the issue of justice, and to do justice for those who are most vulnerable. In the COP27, Loss and Damage Fund was a celebrated win for Pacific Island countries, as our region is among the most vulnerable in the region. And this is in the hope that the fund will do justice to the small island countries of the Pacific. From the small island countries of the Pacific and most vulnerable, the perspective is that the fund should comply with the key principles of good government, good governance, and good administration, and the principles of democracy, fairness and equity, responsibility, accountability, transparency, professionalism, and justice. As such, Tonga and our Pacific Island countries only make negligible contribution to greenhouse gases and their emission, yet we suffer the most adverse impact of climate change. And it is only fair to address this climate injustice by allowing participation by the small island countries of the Pacific on the negotiation table, and also in the management of the Loss and Damage Fund. So there is a call on parliaments to support nominations from small and vulnerable states to become members of the body that would govern the Loss and Damage Fund. Secondly, it is critical to ensure that the Loss and Damage Funds must have funds in it. Parliaments must ensure that their respective governments fulfill the pledges made by their respective governments to finance the Loss and Damage Fund, because it is their responsibility and those who pollute have a responsibility to compensate sufficiently. We are informed that at this stage, there is 600 million pledged for the fund, but this is not enough. Tonga alone would need 1.5 billion of funding to combat the impact of climate change and to build back its infrastructure. It is critical that the loss and damage funds are available and accessible. Already Tonga and other small developing countries of the Pacific and other parts of the world are experiencing challenges in the long delays in accessing climate financing. We must ensure that there is adequate support from the loss and damage funds to enable small and vulnerable states to quickly access the fund. A delay in the availability and access to finance will delay action and will worsen the situation, and hence justice is also delayed. So the fund should be governed by a transparent process based on best practices and the highest professional standards, and the allocation of loss and damage funds must be based on merit and on an equitable basis. It is crucial that we contextualize our situation when we attempt to quantify the impacts of climate change. This is to ensure that displacement and forced migration due to climate change is adequately addressed by the Loss and Damage Fund. This is so that we can have absolute clarity on what we hope for the Loss and Damage Fund will achieve. The most dire and worst possible scenario of the impacts of climate change is now happening in our region. Our islands are sinking due to rising sea level, and already our Pacific communities are at the risk of climate displacement and forced migration due to the impacts of climate change. We are at risk of losing our homes, migrating to foreign countries, and losing part of our identity, our heritage, and also our culture. While we cannot even put a dollar value on this immense non-economic loss, it is crucial that we ensure the Loss and Damage Fund is a safety net. To do this, we support the call for an amended definition of refugees. To do this, we support the call for an amended definition so that it will ensure that the Loss and Damage Fund will be a safety net and a provided haven with hope for those displaced or forced to migrate as a result of impacts of climate change. So the Loss and Damage Fund, if managed effectively and efficiently, will bring real justice to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for your perspectives for your country. It's very important. And we will now move on to the last panelist in this session, Mr. Mohammed Ali. Mr. Ali is a member of the Shura Council of Bahrain. The floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أيها السيدات والسادة, dear جليسة الدورة, يسعدني في البداية أن أهنئ دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة على التنظيم الرائع لمؤتمر الأطراف 28 في اتفاقية الأمم المتحدة الإطارية بشأن تغير المناخ، والشكر كذلك إلى المجلس الوطني الاتحادي برئاسة معالي صقر بن قباش الذي يشرفنا اليوم بحضوره هذه الجلسة، وكذلك أقدم الشكر إلى الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي IPU على إتاحة الفرصة لي للمشاركة معكم اليوم في هذه الجلسة للحديث في قضية مهمة. أنا أعتقد أن هي ربما تكون أهم القضايا العالمية الآن، وهو موضوع تغير المناخ الذي أصبح واقعاً ولم يعد من الماضي كما كان يظن. وكما يعلم الجميع أنه قد مر أكثر من 30 عاماً منذ أن وقعت دول العالم على اتفاقية الأمم المتحدة الإطارية بشأن تغير المناخ UNFCCC في ريو دي جانيرو في البرازيل عام 1992، والتي تضع وغيرها من المعاهدات التي تبعتها بعد ذلك كبروتوكول كيوتو واتفاق باريس وما تلاهم التزامات على الدول وفقاً لوضعها التنموي والمالي والجغرافي. ولقد مر أكثر من 28 عام منذ أن عقد المؤتمر الأول للأطراف COP1 في برلين عام 1995، والذي شهد المفاوضات الأولى الصعبة والمعقدة بين مختلف الدول والمجموعات الإقليمية والاقتصادية والكتل المختلفة. ومنذ ذلك الحين تم عقد العديد من مؤتمرات الأطراف حتى وصلنا إلى هذا المؤتمر COP28 في الإمارات العربية المتحدة الرائعة والمزدهرة والمضيافة. وأنا شخصياً شهدت بعضاً من هذه المؤتمرات الأطراف منذ ريو دي جانيرو حتى الآن. فالاتفاقيات والالتزامات وآليات الدعم والمسؤولين والدول المسؤولة عن الانبعاثات وغازات الدفيئة والدول التي تعاني من تأثير تغير المناخ ونتائجه معروفة للجميع، وتم وضع آليات الدعم التقني والمالي بحيث تتحمل كل دولة مسؤوليتها وفق مبدأ المسؤوليات المشتركة لكن المتباينة common but differentiated responsibilities. وقامت الدول مجتمعة أو منفردة بالإضافة إلى جمعية الأمم المتحدة بجهود كبيرة وهائلة في مجال تغير المناخ، وكذلك الجامعات ومراكز البحوث تقدم تقارير وافرة عن تغير المناخ، أسبابه وتأثيراته وآليات التخفيف والتكيف والمنهجيات التي يجب اتباعها. ما الذي حدث؟ ما الذي نتج حتى الآن؟ للأسف ليس كافياً ولا واعداً لمواجهة ظروف المناخ القاسية، خاصة على تلك الدول التي تواجه تأثيرات لا رجعة فيها irreversible and irreparable. وفقاً لأحدث تقرير، وهو تقرير حالة العمل المناخي Climate Action الذي صدر عام 2023، هناك القليل من الإجراءات الإيجابية فيما يتعلق بالتخفيف والتكيف، وتزداد تأثيرات تغير المناخ سوءاً مع مرور الوقت. ذلك يحدث في ظل الاتفاقيات وآليات الدعم والأبحاث العلمية الوفيرة التي تكشف عن التأثير الاجتماعي والاقتصادي والبيئي لتغير المناخ، وكذلك مع وجود الدعم السياسي القوي والهائل. ما يحدث في تنزانيا كما ذكر اليوم مستر مارتن تشونغ الأمين العام للIPU هو دليل مبين على ما يواجهنا من كوارث ضخمة في هذا الموضوع. يجب أن ينظر إلى تغير المناخ بعيداً عن الأبعاد الإقليمية أو المحلية المحدودة، وبنظرة واعية وعلمية لكي نتمكن من العمل وفقاً لذلك، حيث تختلف تجارب الدول مع تغير المناخ وتأثيراته، وكذلك خيارات التكيف والتخفيف وفقاً لحجم كل دولة وتضاريسها وموقعها واستخدام الأراضي فيها وأشكال الأراضي فيها. كذلك هناك دول جزرية صغيرة الحجم ومناطق منخفضة، ودول جبلية ومناطق ساحلية، ودول تحتوي على أنهار وجبال جليدية، لذلك تختلف قابلية التأثر من دولة إلى أخرى. وعلى ذكر الدول الجزرية الصغيرة أو ما يسمى Small Island Developing State SIDS، هي دول لا يزيد عددها عن أكثر من 52 دولة، وعدد سكانها لا يزيد عن 65 مليون، تعاني أكثر من الدول الأخرى في هذا المجال، تعاني من آثار تغير المناخ. وبناء على ذلك تم تحديد الضعف vulnerability وقابلية التأثر وفقاً للتعرض لتغير المناخ والحساسية والقدرة على التكيف، ويتم قياس القدرة على التكيف من خلال عوامل عدة من بينها المرونة ما يسمى resilience، وتوفر البنية التحتية والتكنولوجيا والاستعداد. الخسائر والأضرار تحدث بأشكال مختلفة. هناك موجات الحرارة التي تؤدي إلى ارتفاع مستوى سطح البحار في الكرة الأرضية، واضطراب النظم البيئية، وفقدان الحيوانات والنباتات، وكذلك الفيضانات في بعض الدول كما ذكر الأخ في باكستان، وفقدان التنوع البيولوجي، وفقدان الغابات بسبب الحدائق وندرة المياه، وغير ذلك من الآثار التي تؤدي إلى عواقب اقتصادية واجتماعية وبيئية خطيرة. يقضي تغير المناخ في بعض البلدان على النسيج الاقتصادي والاجتماعي والثقافي وبقاء المجتمعات، مما دفع حيث يدفع بعض الناس بعيدا عن أراضيهم الأصلية بسبب تغير المناخ وأصبحوا مهاجرين، أي أن فقدان أراضيهم الأصلية وثقافتهم وبالتالي فقدان التماسك الاجتماعي، ومن المتوقع أن يتم تهديد ملايين بالنزوح بحلول منتصف هذا القرن. لذلك الخسائر والأضرار في العديد من المناطق لا يمكن إصلاحها وغير قابلة للعكس irreversible، بل أنه أكثر من ذلك، بحيث يؤثر تغير المناخ على البلدان الفقيرة التي لا تساهم كثيرا في انبعاثات، ولكن ليس بنفس القوة التي تتأثر بها البلدان الغنية، لأن الدول الفقيرة مواردها غير كافية وإمكانياتها غير مناسبة في كثير من الأحيان لمواجهة تغير المناخ. الآلية المعتمدة التي تم الاتفاق عليها بين الأطراف والمكرسة لمواجهة تأثير تغير المناخ تواجه وضعا حرجا منذ السنوات الأولى للمفاوضات، ووضعت أشكال ومنصات مختلفة وترتيبات مؤسسية مختلفة في هذا المضمار. لم يكن هناك تقدم كافي فيما يتعلق في هذا الشأن. هل نعلم كم تم دفعه من 100 مليار دولار التي تم الاتفاق عليها في مؤتمر باريس للدول المخصصة لدعم الدول الأكثر ضعفا والتي تأثرت؟ وهل تم استخدامها في مشاريع لتعويض الخسائر والأضرار بشكل فعال؟ وهل كانت هناك إنجازات إيجابية ملحوظة في هذه الدول؟ وهل تم الاستناد عند دفع هذه المبالغ إذا كانت قد دفعت على مبدأ القانون الدولي ومبدأ الملوث يدفع، وعلى المبدأ الرئيسي وهو القدرات المشتركة ولكن المتباينة؟ يبدو أن الترتيبات المؤسسية التي أنشئت يتم تعديلها في طبيعتها وأشكالها ووظائفها ووسائلها. ومن أجل تخفيض الأثر والضرر ما يسمى loss and damage، تم الاتفاق في باريس على تخفيض درجة الحرارة أو الإبقاء عليها في حدود 1.5 ديجري وفقا لاتفاقية باريس، بحيث يتم تخفيض نصف الانبعاثات بعام 2030، وفي بعض الدول رأت أن يكون ذلك في عام 2035، وهذا كله في الطريق إلى ما يسمى بالحياد الصفري في عام 2050. بعض الدول عملته في عام 2060. فمن الضروري إعادة هيكلة آليات الخسائر والأضرار على وجه السرعة للتكيف لمكافحة الأضرار غير القابلة للإصلاح أو غير القابلة للانعكاس، بحيث نستطيع جميعا العمل على جعل درجة الحرارة في حدود المتفق عليه، وهو 1.5 درجة مئوية حسب الاتفاق باريس الأخير، وأن نتمكن من التخفيض إلى النصف في عام 2030 والحياد الصفري أو الحياد الكربوني في عام 2060. هل ممكن تحقيق ذلك؟ هذا سؤال مطروح أمام الحضور. كذلك الدول التي تتعرض للتهديد الفعلي والمحتمل عليها مسؤولية إعادة صياغة سياستها واستراتيجيتها فيما يتعلق بخيارات التكيف منعا للأضرار وزيادة تلك الأضرار. نحن في دول مجلس التعاون الخليجي تجربتنا في مجال التقييم لهذا الأثر، تقييم تغير المناخ في تقدم مستمر. معظم الدول أنشأت قواعد المعلومات الأساسية وحددت المناطق المهددة والضعيفة، وكذلك وضعت استراتيجيات للطاقة وبدائل الطاقة بحيث الانتقال يكون تدريجيا وغير مزعجا لكثير من الدول من الاعتماد على الوقود الأحفوري النفط والغاز إلى مزيج من الطاقة المتجددة النظيفة. توقعت الكثير من دول المجلس التعاون الخسائر والأضرار التي قد تحدث بسبب موجات الحرارة في هذه المنطقة، لكن ارتفاع مستوى سطح البحر الذي قد يؤثر على المدن والجزر الساحلية والبنية التحتية والتطور الحضري وندرة المياه وزيادة الملوحة وفقدان الحيوانات والنباتات وفقدان بعض المناطق الرطبة أو ما يسمى بالويتلاند. فمن الضروري وضع المزيد من آليات التكيف لحماية الأصول الحيوية من خلال تقييم المخاطر والمناطق الضعيفة خاصة تلك التي تتأثر تأثرا بالغا بتأثير تغير المناخ على المستوى الاجتماعي، ويجب تطوير المزيد من برامج التوعية ليكون الجمهور جاهزا، كما ينبغي وضع المزيد من البرامج التعليمية الموجهة في هذا الإطار. أعتقد أنه يجب على البرلمانات أن تطور مناهجها في التشريع بعيداً عن المنهج التقليدي، بحيث يكون التشريع مركزاً وموجهاً نحو مواجهة تغير المناخ ومواجهة الخسائر والأضرار، وبشكل رصين وصلب يصل مداه عالمياً، وأن يكون شريكاً فاعلاً مع الحكومات في وضع هذه السياسات والتشريعات. شكراً لكم.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ali, for your very interesting remarks. Now, dear colleagues that we have heard from all of our panelists, we will use the remaining time in the session to give the delegates the opportunity to take the floor. As mentioned in the previous process, I would like to remind you to please keep your interventions short and concise. You will have a maximum of 2 minutes in order to allow to as many delegates as possible the opportunity to speak. Please also remember to introduce yourself when taking the floor. We will first start with the delegations that they didn't have the chance to speak in the first session. To begin, I would like to invite Gabon to take the floor. And then is the turn of Côte d'Ivoire and Belgium.
Merci. Vous l'avez dit, je suis du Gabon, de la délégation des députés du Gabon. Pour les collègues et les participants qui ne savent pas où est le Gabon, qui n'ont pas une idée précise du Gabon, je voudrais simplement dire que c'est sous l'équateur, au milieu de l'Afrique, sous l'équateur, le long de l'océan Atlantique sur 900 km. 267 000 km² au sol et 235 000 km² en mer, soit 502 000 km² de superficie globale. Sur les 267 000 km² au sol, 88% sont constitués de forêts primaires, forêts secondaires. Nous sommes donc un pays important dans le cadre du bassin du Congo-Ogooué. C'est désormais le nom de ce bassin, Congo-Ogooué, qui prend en compte les deux fleuves, le fleuve du Congo et le fleuve du Gabon. Nous avons sur le climat plusieurs politiques publiques très fortes, très poussées, à un niveau très élevé au niveau des chefs de l'État. Nous sommes le deuxième pays de ce bassin, qui est l'un des 3 poumons de l'humanité. Je ne reviendrai pas sur les avancées qui ont été faites depuis le début de cette COP, notamment en ce qui concerne les fonds bleus et les dotations qui ont été faites, que nous apprécions, et nous souhaitons simplement que rapidement, que ces fonds soient effectifs, que les mécanismes de mise à disposition des fonds soient les plus simples possibles, les modalités, parce qu'une chose est de mettre de l'argent dans les fonds, une chose est de le décaisser. Nous souhaitons qu'il y ait des guichets pour que rapidement, les problèmes qui se posent, notamment en ce qui concerne le réchauffement climatique et surtout les pertes et dommages, puissent trouver des solutions. Pour cette brève intervention, je voudrais uniquement mettre l'accent sur quelques points, très rapidement, puisqu'on n'a que 2 minutes. Je voudrais que nous mettions l'accent sur l'aménagement durable des forêts de production et la prise en compte des groupes vulnérables qui vivent de ces forêts-là. Parce que nous sommes un pays de forêt et les populations vivent de forêt, de cueillette, des fruits, etc. Et le bois de chauffage, l'énergie, etc. Le deuxième point, c'est l'accompagner financièrement, justement dans le cadre de ces fonds qui ont été mis en place.
If you could please wrap up, we would appreciate it.
Les 2 minutes sont passées. Accompagner financièrement les gestionnaires des forêts. Le troisième point, c'est l'urbanisation qui doit de plus en plus prendre une place, la foresterie urbaine. Le quatrième point, c'est les forêts de production aménagées durablement et certifiées. doivent être considérées comme des aires protégées. Nous avons une grande préoccupation en ce qui concerne le traitement des déchets, notamment des déchets plastiques dans l'océan, d'une manière générale, mais également la prise en compte des mers, les océans et les espaces aquatiques maritimes qui doivent être de plus en plus protégés. Et enfin, nous souhaitons que les députés, les parlementaires que nous sommes bénéficions des mesures de renforcement des capacités, notamment en ce qui concerne la finance climatique. Parce que les projets de loi que prennent les exécutifs viennent à l'Assemblée et il est bon que les parlementaires que nous sommes soyons parfaitement outillés pour pouvoir les apprécier. Je vous remercie pour votre attention.
Thank you very much, and I would like to remind to the delegates to speak maximum up to 2 minutes in order more delegations to have the chance to speak. Thank you very much. Now let me give the floor to the Côte d'Ivoire. Let us pass to give the floor to Belgium and then to Slovenia. Belgium with us? Yes.
Thank you very much, and a nice greet to all my colleagues. Climate change is the biggest mondial challenge, and as member of our parliaments, we must use our voice and energy every day again in Parliament to push government in the right direction. And what can we do? I'll give one example in my 2 minutes. We must give the message to our governments to end with fossil subsidies. The number is there, colleagues. The International Monetary Fund calculated that all of our countries together spends more than $7 billion every year on fossil fuels. This is more than 7% of the GDP worldwide. On the moment that we know that we get rid of fossil fuels, we are all searching for money to invest in a better society. And sometimes we forget that we are already spending a lot of money in these fuels which make our planet sick. In my country, we give money to cars for enterprises. We give discount to truck companies when they buy fuel, and we do not tax plane tickets. We can do better. We don't have to take away the subsidies just to keep them. We can use the money to help truck companies for the transition to clean trucks. We can make trains cheaper and help people to isolate houses. As a member of our parliament, I ask my government to act. I ask it again day after day. It's my duty to do that. It's our duty to do that. We have to phase out fossil subsidies. We know the figures and we have to make a concrete time schedule for that. I know we have to do a lot, but this topic is very important, so I'll hope you share my fight. I will do this in Belgium. I will hope you will fight in your parliament. And if you want today share your ideas about this fight, I'm eager to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to give the floor to Slovenia.
Thank you very much. I'm Miriam Bon-Kleinschek, a member of the National Assembly of the Republic of Slovenia. Ladies and gentlemen, achieving climate neutrality is for Slovenia one of the key issues in the implementation of the Paris Agreement and the 2030 Agenda. Slovenia aims to attain climate neutrality by 2050. We are actively working to increase the use of renewable energy sources and improve energy efficiency, and we to increase the use of renewable energy sources and improve energy efficiency, and we are in the process of drafting our first national climate law to reinforce our climate endeavors. However, to reach the annual target of $1 billion United States dollars and the double adaptation actions by 2025, it is imperative to mobilize climate finance from diverse sources. Equally essential is active participation in discussions regarding a new collective quantified target. Slovenia agrees that a successful global green transition requires intensified efforts to align all financial flows, both public and private, with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Therefore, Slovenia also supports the establishment of a fund directed at the most vulnerable countries and the individuals and communities at risk. Dear colleagues, the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals is a shared responsibility, as only a unified and collaborative approach will ensure their successful achievement. I'm optimistic and confident that this conference will deliver the expected results for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to invite the Democratic Republic of Congo to take the floor. And then it is Russian Federation and China.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Ladi Angotikala, je suis sénateur de la République démocratique du Congo. Tous savons que la République démocratique du Congo est pratiquement dans le grand bassin du Congo et représente le deuxième poumon du monde. À travers le monde, tous sommes en train de ressentir l'impact du changement climatique, alors même que la température n'a augmenté que de 0,8 degrés Celsius par rapport à l'ère pré-industrielle. Beaucoup d'entre nous connaîtront peut-être les conséquences plus tragiques d'un réchauffement climatique de 2 degrés Celsius d'ici 20 à 30 ans. C'est en sachant que si nous ne faisons rien, c'est de 4 degrés Celsius que la température augmentera d'ici la fin du siècle. Les scientifiques sont formels quant à ces. Ils affirment qu'avec 2 degrés de plus, un scénario qui risque de se concrétiser d'ici 20 à 30 ans, le monde connaîtra de pénuries alimentaires généralisées, de vagues de chaleur sans précédent et des cyclones plus intenses. En Afrique subsaharienne, le chercheur atteste qu'avec un réchauffement de 1,5 à 2 degrés Celsius, la modification de régime de précipitation entraînera de vagues de sécheresse, d'aridité et d'inondations qui rendront entre 40 et 80 degrés et 80% des terres agricoles impropres à l'agriculture à l'horizon 2030 et 2020. La COP28 est donc appelée à mener quelques batailles climatiques essentielles, à savoir la réduction des émissions de dioxyde de carbone, l'abandon progressif des combustibles fossiles, le financement de la transition énergétique. Et compte tenu de l'évidence selon laquelle la politique climat actuelle risque d'augmenter des émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 9% d'ici 2030 par rapport au niveau de 2010. Alors qu'il faudrait qu'elle baisse de 45% pour se donner une chance de rester sur 1,5 degré Celsius de réchauffement climatique. L'impératif de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre s'impose, notamment par la sortie de toute énergie fossile au plus tard en 2050. Parce que plus de 80% des émissions mondiales de gaz à effet de serre proviennent de la combustion des énergies fossiles, du gaz, du pétrole et du charbon. Alors que l'impact de cette COP28 qui nous accueille à Dubaï, sur cette question étant donné que cette dernière COP est la première COP du bilan de l'accord de Paris. Ainsi, pour la première fois, le pays vont se faire le point sur des avancées ou depuis 2015 sur comment taxer les superpollueurs, le pays développé et riche qui sont largement responsables des émissions historiques des gaz à effet de serre mondiales et donc de la crise climatique actuelle. Il va être important pour nous de pouvoir mentionner une guerre imposée à la République démocratique du Congo qui contribue à la destruction de l'écosystème, à la destruction de la forêt, ainsi que à la violence faite à la femme et à l'enrôlement des jeunes à l'armée. D'où j'en appelle aux parlementaires du monde de pouvoir s'associer à la RDC, de mettre la pression sur le multinationaux qui financent ces mouvements des terroristes qui pillent la République démocratique du Congo en détruisant l'écosystème. Nous vous remercions.
Thank you. And I would like to invite the Russian Federation to take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Sergei Kislyak. I'm Russian senator. I represent the first lung of the world, a country that has 2/3 of the forest in the world. We are blessed to have this natural resource that in many ways absorbs the greenhouse gases that are being produced on our huge territory. But it's not certainly the only contribution that we make in order to reduce the gases. But I would like to underline one thing. I've been listening to many speakers here, and almost everybody appeal for more ambition, for doing things faster, trying to introduce new dates, new timelines as a substitute for Paris Agreement obligations. I'm somewhat worried that we are forgetting that the tasks of combating the climate change are much more complex than just moving numbers and moving dates. It needs to be dealt in a complex and balanced way, in a way that would be compatible with sustainable development goals for each and every country representing here, in a way that would be preserving ability to produce energy, not just to phase out fossil fuels. And that means that in the meantime, one has to use low-emitting sources of energy. And it has to be part of the collective strategy of the world. What I'm trying to insist is a balanced and complex approach to the problem, nationally wise. We are trying to do this exactly this way. In each and every big program of economic development in Russia, we introduce green-friendly component, and we are making progress in full compliance with our Paris Agreement commitments. We also introduced a national program that is called Ecology, which is rather helpful because it is helping us to implement the commitments that we have taken in Paris in a way that would be fully compatible with the timelines defined in the Paris commitments. We also introduced, it was signed by the president only several weeks ago, a new climate strategy. That is a complex document that gives direction to the government on how the further developments in the industrial and economic development should be conducted in a way that would be fully compatible with our commitment. By the way, among other things, it sets 2060 as our national goal to become fully carbon neutral. So what I'm trying to say that this complex approach is something that needs to be expanded further, because we are dealing with a very complex, multifaceted issue. In some parts of the world, it's getting hotter. In some parts of the world, it's getting colder. Today, in a number of cities in Russian Siberia, it's minus 50 centigrade. It's unprecedented. And we also understand that the man-made problems to nature are not the only ones that change the climate. The natural sources are much more significant, and we have to learn how to cope with that, how to adopt our policies in order to survive collectively in the world that is changing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would like to call China to take the floor, and then it is Poland and Thailand.
Thank 尊敬的各位来宾，下午好。我是来自中国全国人大环境与资源保护委员会副主任委员，很高兴参加今天的会议。感谢议联和阿联酋议会为我们大会所做的周到安排。我愿借此机会向各位代表介绍中国在积极推动应对气候变化方面取得的经验。中国始终高度重视应对气候变化，一直是全球应对气候变化事业的积极参与者和贡献者。近年来，中国在完善与气候变化相关的法律制度方面取得了很大的进展。目前，中国已经陆续出台并实施循环经济促进法、可再生能源法、节约能源法、清洁生产促进法等多部与应对气候变化相关的法律。新一届全国人大立法规划当中，已经将研究制定应对气候变化的专门法律列入我们的立法计划。近10年来，中国二氧化碳排放强度下降了35%左右，相当于用约14吨标准煤，相当于少用了14亿吨标准煤，少排放了37亿吨二氧化碳。中国水电、风电、太阳能发电等可再生能源发电装机居世界第一，非化石能源发电装机容量占比已经达到50.9%。中国作为为全球提供了50%的风电设备和80%的光伏发电设备，带动全球可再生能源成本大幅度的下降。本世纪以来，全球新增绿化面积的1/4来自中国。中方愿意同各方携手，遵循公约及其巴黎协定公平、共同但有区别的责任和各自能力原则，做有利于团结合作的事情，为创造我们更好的、美好的未来不懈努力。谢谢。
Thank you very much, and let me invite Poland to take the floor.
Thank you. Gabriela Morawska-Stanecka, a member of the Senate of the Republic of Poland. I support all voices highlighting the importance and urgency in creating effective mechanisms for loss and damages. The first mechanism was created 10 years ago during conference in Parties 19 in Warsaw as a Warsaw mechanism for loss and damage. We are happy to see that the idea that was born under Polish presidency of the COP becomes more and more operational. I hope that with the agreed Santiago network for loss and damage, we'll finally have a chance to see the fruits of the idea planted in Warsaw. I believe it's crucial for the international community, especially developing states, to realize how important it is to have a mechanism that helps the most vulnerable and marginalized people affected by the adverse effect of climate change to adjust. I think that engagement of international financial institutions such as World Bank is crucial here. At the same time, I hope that we would be able to draw from our previous experiences in financing global aid, both positive and negative, to be able to create a mechanism for fair, targeted support. Additionally, As a member of the IPU Executive Committee, I'd like to come back to previous point and highlight the importance of our campaign, Parliaments for the Planet. Climate challenges involve restrictions and huge costs, of which, especially in Poland, we were well aware. However, there is no doubt that as elected representatives of citizens, we are obliged to set an example. We should therefore act according to the principle, think globally, act locally. I declare that with a new term of parliament in Poland, we will be gradually implementing new toolbox, 10 actions for greener parliaments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor again to delegations that have already spoken this morning. So I would definitely appreciate if you could keep your interventions at a maximum of 2 minutes. Thank you very much. So I would like to give the floor to Thailand.
Thank you, Madam Chair, honorable panelists and colleagues. I'm Saniwan Boban, the member of Thai Parliament. Thailand is the 18th rank in the world for the greenhouse gas emission, but we are the 9th in the world on the Global Warming Risk Index. We just confront with a big flooding over the past 2 or 3 months. We and other Asian countries will be under the drought situation with from the El Niño phenomena next year and probably prolonged for the 2 or 3 years. Thailand has the disaster risk management plan, and we are preparing the Climate Change Act at the moment. As Ms. Elena said, the multi-hazard early warning system is crucial for the high-risk country. Thailand also plans to establish the initiative to set up the effective early warning system nationwide. We look forward for a well-constructed financial support mechanism, which is transparent, uncomplicated, timely, and fairness. In this regard, we need a strong collaboration, the true involvement of local communities, civil society, indigenous people, and other stakeholders to get the climate justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to Morocco and then to the Pan-African Parliament.
شكرا سيدة الرئيسة. أنا المتحدثة ليلى داهي، نائب بالبرلمان المغربي ونائب بالبرلمان الإفريقي ورئيسة تجمع الشباب بالبرلمان الإفريقي. بدوري لن أفوت الفرصة لأشكر دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة على حسن التنظيم المحكم لهذه القمة، كما أتقدم بجزيل الشكر للمجلس الوطني الاتحادي تحت رئاسة معالي صقر قباش. أريد في البداية أن أشدد على ضرورة إشراك والاستماع للشباب الإفريقي لسببين رئيسيين. الأول لأنهما أبناء القارة السمراء، وهي الأقل تلوثا للمناخ، وللأسف الشديد هم أيضا الأكثر تعرضا لأضرار المناخ. معالي الحضور، معالي السعادة، إن القارة السمراء تحمل وزر الثورة الصناعية على مدى عقود طويلة، مما يتسبب في ارتفاع الحرارة والتصحر وندرة المياه في قارة لا تساهم سوى ب3% من التلوث العالمي، وهي اليوم ومن هذا المنبر تطالب بعدالة مناخية تكون فيها المسؤوليات مستحقة للتعويضات، لأن العالم الذي نطمح له يجب أن يكون منصفا للشعوب في الحق في التصرف في خيراتها، وهو ما لم يكن دوما ممكنا في إفريقيا. كما يمكن اعتبار التصحر وندرة المياه المسؤول الأول عن الهجرة السرية والفقر والهشاشة والأمن الغذائي، بل المفارقة أن نصف سكان جنوب الصحراء لا يتوفرون على الكهرباء، ودولهم تصدر 30% من الطاقة العالمية، وهذا العبث بعينه. إن كوب 22 في مراكش كانت صوت إفريقيا ودول الجنوب من أجل عدالة مناخية ومجالية. واليوم نجدد هذه المطالب في قمة كوب 28 بالإمارات العربية المتحدة لإسماع صوت 1.3 مليار نسمة ليست مسؤولة عن ارتفاع درجة الحرارة، لكنها متضررة مما أفسده من يدعون أنهم أقوياء العالم وما فعلته الصناعة بالطبيعة على مدى 150 سنة. شكرا لكم.
Thank you very much. And let me invite to take the floor the representative of the Pan-Africa Parliament. Let me invite Italy to take the floor, and then Indonesia.
Sorry, I am Khaddoush Lassi from Morocco. Could I take the floor?
For a second intervention, you mean?
From Morocco.
Yes, please, yes.
تماما كما قال السيد الأمين العام هذا الصباح، التغيرات المناخية كالأوبئة تماما عابرة الحدود. أنا الآتية اليوم إليكم من المغرب تركت الفلاحين وقد وضعوا بذورهم في الأرض وينتظرون أن تمطر السماء، والسماء لا تمطر في ظل التغيرات المناخية إلا نادرا. اليوم نحن هنا مجتمعين في كوب 28 نطرح سؤالا: ماذا يمكن أن نفعل كبرلمانيين وبرلمانيات وتحديدا كشباب ونساء؟ لا أعتقد أنه يمكن أن نستعير أدوارا إضافية، علينا فقط أن نقوم بأدوارنا الدستورية المسندة إلينا. ألسنا مسؤولين عن تجويد وتجديد التشريع في مجال احترام الطبيعة والغابة والماء؟ ألسنا مسؤولين أيضا عن مراقبة السياسات العمومية وتحديدا في مجال تتويج وتشجيع البحث العلمي للبحث عن الإجراءات الناجعة والأقل كلفة في مواجهة مخاطر تغير المناخ؟ ألسنا مسؤولين أيضا في مجال مراقبة البحث العلمي وتشجيعه في هذا الاتجاه؟ ثم هنالك الأدوار التحسيسية للبرلمانيين والبرلمانيات. اليوم نحن في حاجة إلى تغيير ثقافة التعامل مع الماء ومع الطبيعة، ولهذا أعتقد شخصيا أن للنساء أدوارا كبيرة في هذا المجال. النساء مانحات للحياة وأكثر احتراما للماء وأكثر احتراما للطبيعة. وشكرا لكم.
Thank you very much. If a delegation has two different delegates that would like to take the floor, please split your time. So let me pass the floor to Italy. Only 2 minutes. Yes, 1 minute each. So, okay. Italy and then Indonesia.
Thank you. Sono Elena Sironi, membro del Senato della Repubblica Italiana. Siamo tutti d'accordo che c'è un cambiamento climatico in atto che procura danni e che una delle cause sono le emissioni nocive di CO2 nell'aria, che queste emissioni derivano dalla combustione delle fonti energetiche fossili, quali il petrolio e il gas, e che tra l'altro ogni anno causano un altissimo numero di morti e di malati per l'inquinamento dell'aria. Occorre programmare e pianificare verso un rapido annullamento dell'utilizzo delle fonti fossili, confidando che il mondo dell'impresa saprà e già sa cogliere le opportunità del nuovo contesto e del nuovo mercato, riconvertendosi verso il risparmio energetico e le fonti di energia pulita e rinnovabile. Parallelamente, per quanto riguarda le ripercussioni del cambiamento climatico, occorre analizzare e valutare la rischiosità e la pericolosità del territorio, compresi gli insediamenti e gli interventi antropici, e intervenire modificando tutto ciò che è incompatibile con la sicurezza. In Italia abbiamo ormai frequenti e gravissimi fenomeni alluvionali che hanno portato morti e distruzione. È importante avere una normativa che regoli efficacemente e fermi il consumo di suolo e la cementificazione pianificazione soprattutto nelle aree alluvionali, anche in relazione al cambiamento climatico, prevedendo in via privilegiata interventi nature-based per ripristinare le funzioni ecosistemiche del suolo a tutela del territorio e pianificare per evitare futuri insediamenti siano rispettosi delle regole sulla sicurezza del territorio. Gli investimenti per il loss and damage devono comprendere gli investimenti in prevenzione e di smantellamento di tutto ciò che è a rischio per evitare morti ingiuste a causa dei cambiamenti climatici da un lato e a causa dell'inquinamento dall'altro. Non possiamo scordare l'alto numero di morti. La sicurezza e la salute si devono affrontare in prevenzione, perché affrontarli solo dopo che the damage is done significa aver condannato a morte le persone per negligenza. Grazie.
Thank you very much. And let us now give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you for this time. Honorable chairs, distinguished delegates and panelists. In terms of operationalizing loss and damage funding, the Indonesian House believes it should be new, additional, predictable, and adequate. It should also be accessible to all, including developing nations, free of complicated bureaucracy, and include aspects of climate justice and social inclusion. Financial intermediary funds and non-debt instruments can be used in the funding model. It must also consider what is relevant and responsive to needs of affected population, such as recovery, reconstruction, and non-economic losses, as well as transparent fund management without compromising accessibility. It should also subject to other requirements resulted by the UNFCCC COP27, which among others underline agreement on a new financial system for poor or developing countries that are vulnerable and incur losses as a result of climate change. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're going to conclude with the two last remarks on behalf of our delegations. First, I would like to give the floor to Chad, and we're going to conclude with Pakistan.
Merci. Je vais aller très vite parce que le Tchad est aussi un pays sahélien et appartient à l'Afrique centrale. Nous travaillons en réseau en Afrique centrale et nous constatons un déséquilibre dans la répartition des fonds climat. Et nous estimons que le fonds pertes et dommages qui vient d'être adopté ne pourra pas être pareil. Donc nous proposons donc que les préjudices et les inégalités subies par les pays de la sous-région Afrique centrale et du Sahel du fait des effets néfastes des changements climatiques soient prioritairement reconnus, considérés, atténués à travers l'attribution de financements directs en faveur des mesures d'adaptation incluant la transition énergétique. Des mesures d'urgence soient prises pour la sauvegarde du lac Tchad et la prise en compte des réfugiés climatiques et réfugiés de guerre. À l'est du Tchad, vous connaissez le problème qui se passe au Soudan. Des appuis soient suffisamment augmentés pour améliorer l'intégration des enjeux climatiques dans les politiques publiques au Tchad et dans la sous-région Afrique centrale par l'accompagnement de tous les acteurs avec une bonne place, la communauté des parlementaires. Et pour finir, je dirais que des mesures d'accompagnement soient prises pour le renforcement des capacités des pays de la sous-région en vue de faciliter l'accès direct aux différents fonds. Voilà, je vous remercie de votre attention.
Thank you very much, and I would like to give the floor to Pakistan.
Thank you very much. My name is Marvi Mehman. I'm the former Social Protection Minister from Pakistan, and I led a fund for $1.25 billion per year for 6 million beneficiaries. I would like to remind honorable delegates, fellow colleagues, that Pakistan has suffered not once, but twice the super floods, once in 2010 and once in 2022. So we have seen a lot of suffering. We are looking forward. We expect the world to be equitable in its loss and damage fund, of the operationalization of the loss and damage fund. That's my first point. My second point is that as the founding president of the Legislative Alliance for Women Empowerment Protection, US-based corporation, this is the first time in the world that generative AI will be used to do legislative models, which means that model legislation will be created, is being created through extractive generative AI. I expect all parliamentarians in the room and the IPU to support this initiative, because this will not just help climate change, but also social and gender reforms. I thank you for your time, and I hope that Pakistan will be taken into consideration considerably, not just because of the floods in 2022, like I said, but lots of other natural disasters that have happened in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the last intervention on behalf of our delegations. And at this instance, I would like to ask the panelists whether they would like to take a floor for a second intervention, just for 30 seconds, though.
I was not prepared for this, and I don't think I can answer all the interventions. But I think that what I heard from parliamentaries is extremely valuable, and many things which I heard and I took notes. I believe we will pursue. We will help to answer through the future WMO reports. Like, too many things to answer. I'll try not to. I was not prepared to.
Thank you very much.
But Pakistan, you are very, very special. I'm talking Pakistan. We know how many disasters facing, but last one was extremely exceptional because it was compound disaster made of three things, which normally would come one by one. And your weather service did a great job, but the impact was so much, it was just not possible to cope. We know that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Manekova. Anybody else from
Thank
the
you.
panelists?
Thank you very much. And very quickly and very briefly, thank you for all the interventions. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us. It has been very insightful to listen to hear to all of you. I have taken notes from all of the speakers. I agree what my colleague just said about Pakistan. I also share my colleagues in Africa the same concerns. We all are partners. We are brothers in this continent, and we share all the worries together. Of course, in the Sahel region, it's also a big problem that we are facing all together, and all respect to all the interventions that have taken place. The fact that we are here, all of us sitting together and discussing this is a great achievement already. United Arab Emirates, thank you very much for bringing us into the green zone, making us more visible, more heard. Thank you very much for doing that. This means that we are more aggressive in our way and more heard by our governments, and this is the pressure we should carry on, and this is the job we will do until we meet in next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Darwish and Mr. Fusi Maholi.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to remind fellow parliamentarians that on behalf of the very, very small countries of the world, we almost have nothing to do with climate change and their impact on us. We are at the very forefront of having to bear the brunt of what's happening in terms of very intense cyclones up to Category 5 almost every year. We have other incidences of low-lying areas being underwater right now. But we just wanted to make sure that there's justice in this whole framework and business of trying to combat the effect of climate change. And on behalf of the small island states, I'd like to remind you fellow parliamentarians, we need to be visible, we need to be represented, and our plight and our fate is in your hands, and we ask you that the only way to do justice for us is to make sure that this loss and damage fund is working and there is sufficient fund. If there is nothing in this fund sufficiently, we are going to be suffering in the next decades to come, and we are going to be late in trying to combat
the effect of climate change, and there will be serious consequences for the small island states in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Ali?
Thank you so much. It was great to listen to all the people who intervene representing their countries. I would like to comment on, or I'd like to actually to tend to agree with the right honorable gentleman from the Russian Senate who commented on the dates of meeting the commitment. I think I agree with you that fulfilling the commitment and that neither the mitigation or the adaptation is easy. It's very complicated and complex process. If the world till now has not done much toward meeting that commitment, I think going from now to what is called the zero emission, the way towards that point is not paved easily. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to thank all the panelists and all of the delegations for your contribution and attendance to this very important and timely important event. Our support to the Loss and Damage Fund is one of the greatest expressions of solidarity we need to show in the face of the climate crisis. Let's all accelerate our parliamentary action against the climate crisis for our people, for the future generations, for nature. Thank you very much.
Parlement, ma planète. Samuel Kogolati, député en Belgique et chef de la délégation belge à l'Union interparlementaire. Alors ça commence évidemment par nous-mêmes. Moi je me rends avec un vélo pliable et en train au Parlement tous les jours. Nous faisons un maximum au Parlement pour économiser notamment l'énergie, mais ça passe aussi par des mesures structurelles. Le Parlement est soucieux de l'environnement puisque pour la première fois, il a mis sur pied une vraie commission climat à part entière. Et c'est très important puisque aujourd'hui, les parlementaires ne contrôlent plus simplement, comme traditionnellement, le budget, donc ça veut dire les comptes financiers du gouvernement, mais le Parlement belge contrôle aussi le budget carbone de chaque ministère au niveau fédéral. Et ça, c'est vraiment une avancée, je pense, en matière de respect de la planète. C'est vraiment important qu'on puisse passer des paroles aux actes. C'est à ça que servent les parlementaires, c'est d'implémenter de vrais changements au niveau juridique pour avoir des changements contraignants qui aient un réel effet sur le terrain pour la planète, pour lutter contre les dérèglements climatiques. Et moi, je me suis battu au niveau national en Belgique, mais aussi au niveau de l'Union interparlementaire pour la reconnaissance d'un nouveau crime d'écocide.
Translating global climate commitments into national laws and policies is vital for climate action and outcomes. The Climate Change Laws of the World database tracks these across 196 countries and territories, plus the European Union. Updated regularly, it is the most comprehensive global database, covering over 5,000 climate laws, policies and submissions to the UNFCCC, the UN body tasked with supporting the global response to the climate crisis. The database can help you understand how countries are implementing responses to the climate crisis. You can use it to understand important trends, such as the incorporation of equity and just transitions principles in climate laws, or mandates for zero emissions vehicles. You can use the database to search the full text of laws and policies relating to issues of interest. For example, forest protection. There is also a useful high-level summary of laws and policies. You can see exact matches and related phrases highlighted in the text. This works for documents from all languages, with search and automatic translation to English. You can also browse country profiles to find and compare their climate laws, policies and targets. Here are 3 ways for you to take action as a parliamentarian. Explore the database. Use this to help shape best practice climate laws and policies in your country. Compare. Look at the profile of similar countries to yours to see what they are doing and how you can increase ambition in climate laws and policies. Check. Climate law and policy is changing rapidly. Please check and communicate any information the database is missing.
السادة الحضور، برزت في الآونة الأخيرة جملة من الاستراتيجيات التي تعزز المشاركة البرلمانية وممارسات تحفز الأطر التشريعية والشفافية، والتي تصب جميعها في صالح ترسيخ الدور الرقابي الحاسم للبرلمانات في النقاشات المتعلقة بتغير المناخ وتسريع العمل المناخي بما يضمن تحقيق أهداف مؤتمر كوب 28 واتفاق باريس. كل هذا وأكثر سيتم مناقشته في جلستنا القادمة تحت عنوان الرقابة البرلمانية على تنفيذ اتفاق باريس مع ما بعد الدورة 28 لمؤتمر الأطراف كوب 28. أدعو مديرة الجلسة الآن السيدة أماندا إليس، كبيرة المدراء وبرلمانية ومسؤولية الشراكات والشبكات العالمية في مختبر جولي آن ريجلي العالمي للعقود الآجلة، وكذلك أعضاء الجلسة بالبدء في الجلسة.
Enga mana, enga reo, enga rangatiratanga. Greetings in Māori, the indigenous language of Aotearoa, New Zealand, my birth island, which is seeing many of the problems we have been discussing today. Excellencies, honourable parliamentarians, and our gracious hosts from the UAE, it is an honour for me to join this parliamentary meeting here at COP28 and to moderate this critical session on parliamentary oversight of the Paris Agreement, implementation post-COP28. We have heard the science, we have heard the UN Secretary-General, a breakdown or a breakthrough moment, and we know that after this first global stocktake, increasing ambition for the nationally determined contributions and ensuring that parliamentary oversight, including your legislative and budgetary functions, are absolutely essential. So in this session, we are going to look at how this stronger parliamentary oversight can help drive more effective implementation. You are absolutely key, and as the moderator from the previous session put it so well, let's all accelerate our parliamentary action. So in this session, we are going to hear from leading climate figures, tech experts, and parliamentary representatives to hear how it is possible to accelerate this action in a post-COP28 landscape. In the last part of the session, we will have time for delegates to take the floor. We are already over capacity, so no more interventions are being accepted. There are already 15, and I will remind you 1 to 2 minutes maximum, please. We have just seen a short video from the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Lab and the IPU, which is part of the Parliaments for the Planet campaign on the climate change database of laws. Now, this is an absolutely essential tool for you as parliamentarians. There are now over 5,000 laws as part of this database. So you can search what other countries are doing, and you can also search by topic. For example, if you want to look at carbon drawdown or deforestation. So this is a wonderful tool to help you look at what is good practice. Now, this database is managed by the London School of Economics Grantham Research Institute on Climate Change and the Environment, and we thank them very much for their partnership. I'm now delighted to introduce another terrific tool, Climate Trace, tracking real-time action on climate emissions. And this will allow you as parliamentarians to go down to the facility level in your countries to be able to see where the maximum emissions are coming from. So this is another wonderful tool for you to be able to track against your nationally determined contributions and also to make decisions on where you want to begin shutting down the most climate polluting installations. We are honored to have with us today the co-founder of both What Time and of Climate Trace, which is independently funded by Al Gore and by John Doerr. Gavin McCormick, we are delighted to invite you to the podium to make your presentation and share with MPs how to use your critical tool.
Thank you so much. Climate Trace is a coalition of over 100 collaborating universities, NGOs, and tech companies trying to do something new, trying to make it the case that rather than having emissions data be self-reported by emitters, looking from space using satellites and artificial intelligence to spot emissions. So what you are looking at is a website that anyone can go to, thank you, climatetrace.org, where we have provided information on over 350 million facilities worldwide that collectively account for the majority of greenhouse gas emissions. If you are using this as a live tool, you could zoom in any one of these dots as an emitting facility causing emissions. For example, the purple dots are factories. The orange dots are oil refineries. And this gives a comprehensive view when we combine it with other data of all the sources of climate change, including who is causing them. So just to pick a country, we are here today in the UAE. As an example, you could zoom into any country. Here I've grabbed the UAE. And the size of the dots is the emissions of individual facilities. So for example, many of us flew here in the airport. The world's largest and therefore most emitting airport in the world is in the UAE. You can see that that's the yellow dot near where we are in Dubai. If you drove past a large refinery on your way here, you might have noticed it was flaring. The emissions from that are one of the orange dots. And we can do this for any country. And so the way it works is satellites look from space at individual facilities. These satellites are owned by the United States government, the European Union, the Chinese government, Korean government, Indian government, and a number of private corporations. But they all make this data publicly available. And what artificial intelligence can do is learn to recognize what does a picture of a certain amount of pollution look like. So we've learned to look through many, many pictures at power plants, factories, airports, and so on, and we make those data available to the public. You can zoom into any particular facility and get estimates of its emissions. You can often find its owner. You can find historical information. And our hope is this will make it possible for anyone to begin having the transparency to make intelligent decisions at the local level, at the up-to-date level, and without asking emitters how much they have emitted, but knowing the data independently. And we've also provided a tool that adds it up by country. So if you want to know, for example, what is the sum of all the factories in a country, or the total, I've picked Malawi here at random. The tool allows you to get a good estimate of the emissions going on in any country, any year, and we have really worked hard to avoid the classic bias that certain countries have more emissions data than others. We have really, really worked hard to use satellites to get a global view, so this database is for all countries worldwide, no exceptions. Thank you very much.
Such a useful tool for parliamentarians. We're very happy at the ASU Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Lab to be one of the contributing partners. And this is a way in which universities and research facilities are able to help you in your role as parliamentarians. Of course, it also allows civil society to hold governments to account. So we think this is just terrific work. Thank you, Gavin. 300 million facilities now. Last year, it was some 80,000. So you can see just how useful this data can be and how helpful AI is. Terrific. Thank you so much. It's now my great pleasure to introduce Monica Araya, who is the Executive Director of International Affairs at the European Climate Foundation. She is a champion of integrated climate action across multiple sectors, including helping to develop Costa Rica's national decarbonization plan. And she is here with the very good wishes of Laurence Toubiana, one of the architects of the Paris Agreement, who works with Monica. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you to the Inter-Parliamentary Union and to the Federal National Council of the UAE. We are delighted to be here. The European Climate Foundation, as you heard, is very much linked to Laurence Toubiana, mother of the Paris Agreement. And right now, the idea that we soon reach the first 10 years of the Paris Agreement lead to a lot of questions about what we want to do better, what we want to do differently, what we have to explore. And one of the key questions and one of the key points of energy in the conversations we're having is around the role of parliaments. Because we can't just leave climate action to national governments alone. So in this context of the conversation we have, I know we only have a few minutes. I would like to make a few remarks that link the conversation about parliaments with the COP28 and the moment that we are living right now. Quick reminder, 8 years ago, the world came around the idea that we had to have commitments, that nobody was going to impose any commitments on any country. The country had to choose them. Costa Rica had to choose what it was comfortable with. Argentina had to do the same. And now we are at a point where we have to remind ourselves that we need to improve what we said 8 years ago. So we are at a point in the negotiations where this, as you know very well, the global stocktake is a key part of why we're here. There are many other reasons why we're here. We're looking for solutions, we're looking for inspiration, but we cannot leave Dubai. We cannot leave Dubai without a concrete answer around this 5-year cycle. When we look at what is going on in the negotiations, one thing is really, really clear. We need roadmaps. We need to have very concrete ideas on the implementation that we are going to do. So as I don't know how familiar you are with the process behind the negotiations, but as you know, the cycle that we had until now was about ambition, coalitions, how to put targets, how to get the right people in the room. But now it's getting more difficult, naturally, because it's about implementation. And now it's getting real, and there are really deep pain points because change is difficult. So in the context of the GST, we are asking many, many questions such as what is the role, the new role of the parliament? What is the role of people like you who are not at the national level but are trying to push things from where you are? And in the past, even though I have not been in parliament, I was very involved with the parliament of my country, and I can tell you that some of the champions that really pushed forward a lot of the ambition were there. And in the past, I actually met it was Congressman Villalonga, who is just a coincidence we are here. But the point is that I personally believe this is possible, but more than just a personal belief, our organization is very involved in the question of how to engage better. So there are certain ways of doing this. Is obviously depending on the context, you know, Africa very different from Latin America, Europe different from the US. So nothing of what I'm gonna say should feel like a recipe. But number one, clearly one of the roles that can be played and should be played is about raising the ambition, asking questions, do we have the national target that is consistent with the Paris Agreement? Who is asking this question these days? Well, sometimes it's difficult because other questions get in the way. Inflation, interest rates, and many other questions. So asking these bolder questions makes a huge difference. If you think about, for example, the European Parliament, they just pass resolutions where they say to the presidents, you know, what is going on in the European Union is not enough. They, for example, have passed a resolution calling for the end of direct and indirect fossil fuel subsidies by 2025. They have passed resolutions about tripling renewables, doubling efficiency, phasing out fossil fuels. And of course, they have passed resolutions that are not possible in the national context. But the point with the example is that it does send a signal. It is also a very important function to create a certain sense of sequence that doesn't get interrupted whenever there are elections. So that is another function of the Parliament. For example, in the context, again, because it's the European Union, the European Climate Foundation, I'll bring examples from Europe, but as you can imagine, there are many, many examples from other countries. For example, for instance, in the context of Europe, there have been 29 countries that have passed targets into legislation. So let me just make sure I hold this better. Many of the resolutions that are passed insert mechanisms for participation, and the participation is important because, again, in the spirit of asking questions, somebody has to do a lot of the tracking. Most countries that have plans sometimes leave out the mechanism for asking, for tracking this progress. So parliamentarians have a key responsibility in overseeing not only the mechanisms for tracking action domestically, but also mechanisms for telling the world what has been done and what will be done. And one of the examples, I don't know if you have heard of this one, but one that we certainly find very inspirational is the one from Canada. They have the Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, and one of our really close partners in Canada has been working on this. So it's a fascinating story of how it went from an idea into a concrete act in Canada, and perhaps we have somebody from Canada here. The Scottish Parliament is another example. They developed a model for parliamentary scrutiny of climate change. In the context of France, in the context of other countries, there is also a very clear role for Parliament, which is around giving citizen voice. For example, creating processes that allow for the citizens to express some of their ideas, understanding what is the language that works, how to create more conversations, how to create more interactions with the people who are engaged in climate change or are affected from climate change. Now, a lot of this requires resources. There is no lack of ambition in a lot of developing countries. The ambition is there, but the problem sometimes, or oftentimes, is the resources. And while we talk a lot about how to create mechanisms for bringing resources from abroad and increasing cooperation, in practice, we also have to look at our own national budgets. And we need to optimize how we're spending our own budgets. So in that sense, aligning fiscal incentives, reviewing subsidies is super important in the context of parliaments, because in the context, especially of small countries, they have to look at how the budget is being spent. But for example, in my country, in Costa Rica, the parliament has to approve a lot of loans, and when the loans have components related to climate change, you can imagine that that is a way of very productively engaging the parliament. Finally, there is no, as I said, there is no recipe and there is no way of getting it right at once. But the organizing principles of these new conversations that are happening are around facilitation of dialogues, sharing good practices. We are a big fan of the idea of having parliamentary networks, sharing information. For example, in the context of Latin America, one very I'm very biased, but very inspiring example was what happened with the law to accelerate electrification of transportation. So in the case of Costa Rica, there was the first law that was passed, and that led to a lot of interest from other parliaments, and there was a working group that tried to look at the elements of the law. There is a lot of work going on in terms of what are the best platforms for bringing parliaments in this forum at the COP. And in terms of the spirit of Paris, as you can imagine, the world has changed in the last 8 years. There has been a lot of progress. There have been a lot of technological breakthroughs. There have been a lot of good stories that should inspire us all. But there is one difference between now and 8 years ago, which is that governments are cooperating less. So there is a gap in cooperation that we need to address, and in the context of parliaments, perhaps this forum and many other forums can energize the idea that we cannot just look at this from a strictly national perspective. So thank you.
What a fantastic note on which to end. Thank you so much. Very insightful examples, and important too, your point about aligning fiscal incentives and reviewing subsidies. The IMF came out with a report 2 months ago showing fossil fuel subsidies at $7.1 trillion. That's 7% of global GDP. And the estimate is that if they were removed, those explicit and implicit subsidies, we would have a drop of 34% in emissions by 2030. Fairly close to where we need to get to. So that was a very pertinent point indeed. Thank you so much for those insightful remarks. It's now my great pleasure to move to our next speaker, who is the President of Globe International, Mr. Juan Carlos Villalonga, who has a background as both a politician and an environmentalist, so a unique perspective. And Globe has the first parliamentary pavilion ever at a COP this year. Thank you.
Bueno, en español, les doy tiempo para que busquen sus headphones. Muchas gracias a todos y a la estimada moderadora, y en particular a las autoridades de la Unión Interparlamentaria, que nos permite estar hoy aquí contándoles algunas cosas. En principio, algunas líneas para presentar qué es Globe. Globe Legislators es una organización de legisladores fundada por el senador Al Gore y el senador John Kerry y muchos otros parlamentarios de todo el mundo hace 30 años. Esto fue en el camino a la COP, a Río 92, donde ahí se adoptó la Convención del Clima. Y en ese camino, desde entonces, nos hemos focalizado en el cambio climático, la problemática de la política climática. Entonces no es un tema nuevo para el ámbito parlamentario. Los miembros de Globe, junto a otros, hemos trabajado durante 30 años, desde entonces, para crear una arquitectura internacional de leyes y regulaciones nacionales sobre el cambio climático. Para tomar dimensión de esto, en 1997, cuando fue la COP3, que se adoptó el protocolo de Kioto, según lo que teníamos, el análisis que habíamos hecho, solo había unas 50 leyes y regulaciones vinculadas al cambio climático en todo el mundo. Hoy hay más de 3.000. Y esto se debe al trabajo de los parlamentarios durante este tiempo que ha pasado, estas últimas 3 décadas. Muchos de ellos destacados defensores del clima que pertenecen al Globe, y muchos están aquí presentes hoy. Hemos exigido a los gobiernos que rindan cuentas en sus compromisos climáticos vinculados que presentan aquí en la COP. Entonces, no se trata, como dije, una agenda nueva, pero ahora es más claro que nunca que debemos trabajar juntos mucho más eficazmente como parlamentarios y a través de nuestras instituciones, como el caso de la Unión Interparlamentaria y Globe Internacional y otras redes que existen. La tarea que se viene post-COP28 es enorme. Y creo que uno de los aspectos que hay que destacar es cómo aumentamos la visibilidad de los parlamentarios en este proceso y cómo mejoramos nuestra organización, participación allí. Desde la COP26, Globe ha trabajado estrechamente con una serie de redes y organizaciones parlamentarias, tales como Parlaméricas, el Climate Parliament, Westminster Foundation for Democracy, y para generar lo que fue inicialmente este punto focal para el grupo informal del grupo parlamentario ante la Convención del Clima. GLOB tiene el honor de haber sido designado como punto focal para el grupo parlamentario informal, insisto, desde el año 2021. Como parte de ese trabajo hemos publicado una cantidad de insumos en boletines mensuales, hemos hecho una cantidad de webinars, procurando justamente reunir a los parlamentarios y aumentar el compromiso y el liderazgo climático que tienen que tener. Algunos avances para el mundo parlamentario en relación a la COP28. En este sentido queremos agradecer a la presidencia de la COP el apoyo que ha dado en este caso a los parlamentarios, como lo podemos ver en esta conferencia de hoy. En particular agradecer a la presidencia de la COP27 que convocó a la Unión Interparlamentaria, a GLOB y al Consejo Nacional Federal de los Emiratos Árabes Unidos para mejorar la participación y la colaboración de cara a la COP28. De allí se hicieron una serie de reuniones mensuales y hemos compartido esas actualizaciones con cada uno de los parlamentos nacionales. En esta COP aparecieron dos avances históricos, el Día del Parlamento y el Día Parlamentario. Por primera vez los parlamentarios disponen también disponen de este Día Parlamentario que es hoy, así como también un primer pabellón parlamentario que esto ocurre por primera vez aquí en la COP28, ubicado en la zona sur, en el propio corazón de la COP y que está presente durante estas próximas 2 semanas, estas 2 semanas, esta y la próxima. Y acá quiero agradecer especialmente al ministro británico Graham Stewart, quien fuera presidente de GLOB y estuvo muy involucrado en que podamos tener esta participación aquí en la COP. En ese pabellón que tenemos en la zona sur, GLOB ha albergado una cantidad de reuniones para toda la comunidad parlamentaria. Tenemos un programa completo, repleto de actividades todos los días, más de 50 eventos que abarcan los intercambios de experiencias en los diferentes grupos de parlamentarios regionales y cómo, por ejemplo, cómo acceder a financiamiento o por lo menos, por ejemplo, ayer tuvimos una gran reunión de los parlamentarios de la región justamente diseñando cuál es el camino hacia la COP28, en una COP que los parlamentarios de Brasil nos abren el camino para una COP que en la región la sentimos como nuestra y creemos que va a ser una COP donde el sector parlamentario va a tener una especial participación. En este sentido, ayudaremos a los parlamentarios post-COP28 a celebrar audiencias de evaluación en sus propios parlamentos y también estamos realizando en colaboración con la Westminster Foundation for Democracy una encuesta sobre la participación parlamentaria en este proceso y esto se va a publicar en el mes de abril. Ahora, de cara, porque esto tiene que ver con qué sucede de aquí en más, y yo creo que si me tengo que concentrar de cara a las prioridades que tenemos que poner para los próximos meses, primero es lo que mencionaba, el estatus ante la Convención. Creemos que es esencial que abordemos el estatus de los parlamentarios en el sistema de la ONU y en el proceso de la Convención del Clima. Ya es hora de que exista una categoría adecuada para los parlamentarios. No somos una ONG, no somos un grupo de ONG, no deberíamos seguir siendo categorizados como un grupo informal. GLOB se compromete a trabajar en colaboración con la conferencia, con la convención, con la Unión Interparlamentaria, con la presidencia para explorar las opciones posibles para lograr esto. Y en segunda instancia también tiene que ver con algo que mencioné, la asociación y nuestra propia cooperación. Como organización que ha reunido a líderes parlamentarios en torno al cambio climático durante estos últimos 30 años, invitamos a la Unión Interparlamentaria a unirse a este trabajo mediante algunos acuerdos que permitan trabajar conjuntamente definitivamente. Y en este sentido, quiero mencionar, mi equipo está dispuesto y estamos con toda la vocación para trabajar en un memorándum de entendimiento con la cual la Unión Interparlamentaria, junto con GLOB, podamos tener un programa de acción posterior a esta COP y camino hacia la COP30. Debemos elaborar eso, colaborar mucho, muy lejos de competir, nuestras organizaciones deben fortalecerse en estos objetivos que estamos mencionando y tenemos por delante un reto inmenso. Algunas de las razones por las cuales se mencionaban recién, el rol de los parlamentarios, para que tengan un rol sustantivo y tenemos como organizaciones la responsabilidad de organizarnos para lograr el mayor impacto posible. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. The task after COP28 is huge indeed, as you say, and special thank you for the collaboration yesterday when the Parliaments for the Planet campaign featured in the Globe Parliamentary Pavilion. It's wonderful to see the collaboration going on. Thank you. We now turn to our final speaker, Mr. Waven Milliam, who is the President of the IPU Standing Committee on Sustainable Development and a member of the National Assembly of Seychelles, right on the front lines. He will tell us about some of the important work being done both at the IPU and in his home country of the Seychelles to accelerate climate action. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, Honorable Speakers of Parliament, Secretary General of IPU, Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be here today to discuss the critical role of parliamentary oversight in driving effective implementation of the Paris Agreement and commitments beyond COP28. Foremost, I would like to thank the government of UAE and the Speaker of Honorable Sakar Gobash of the Federal National Council of UAE for the gracious hospitality, and I commend the Federal National Council, IPU, and UNCCC for hosting this sideline COP28 Parliamentary Forum. All glory be to God the Almighty for his favor and grace upon us. My name is Waven William. I am a member of National Assembly of Seychelles, newly elected president of the IPU Standing Committee on Sustainable Development, and privileged to have Honorable Mira Asuwaidi as vice chair from the Federal National Council of UAE. The Seychelles, a picturesque archipelago in the Indian Ocean, is renowned not only for its natural beauty, but also for its commitment to environmental protection. Currently, as reported by Business Insider Africa magazine, amongst 10 African countries' awareness rating, Seychelles has been rated first as of 80%. Seychelles is facing heightened vulnerability to climate change, threats such as sea level rise and extreme weather events. The National Assembly of Seychelles, supported by the IPU and technical partners, has placed increasing importance on robust legislative measures and increased parliamentary oversight mechanisms to strengthen scrutiny amidst these challenges. Seychelles has already submitted enhanced NDC targets towards 2030. There will be intervention in the energy, transportation, and waste management sectors. There will be ocean climate action and blue carbon as nature-based solutions to climate change, committing to protecting at least 50% seagrass and mangrove ecosystem by 2025. I am happy to declare that we are ahead of schedule. Already, 99% of seagrass and 89% of mangroves are under protection. In addition, 50% of our scarce landmass and with 32% of our designated ocean space. Our updated NDC will cost us $600 million USD over 10 years, meaning 5% of our GDP and 10% of our annual budget towards adaptation and mitigation further. To remain on course and sustainable, external support is vital for enhanced mitigation and adaptation action plan. This is the reason why our government is putting emphasis on factoring in the multidimensional vulnerability index criteria, enabling access to additional support because the GDP per capita rating is denying many seeds like Seychelles, classified as high middle income country, opportunities of new funding mechanisms. As parliamentarians, our responsibilities extend beyond the integration of climate priorities into legal frameworks. Both in the Seychelles and globally, we must intensify our focus on oversight, scrutinizing and aligning our national climate laws with international commitments collectively. The oversight role activities are crucial for fostering accountability and transparency, which will guide the implementation of climate-related objectives well beyond the conclusion of COP28. These actions are essential for informed decision-making and reinforcing the implementation of global climate goals. To note, is it not appropriate time now, as we are 7 years away to peak emission before 2025, and by making it mandatory for NDC to form part of climate legislations to hold national government more accountable. Given the developments of COP28, the landmark deal on the loss and damage mechanism discussed here today, it becomes even more important for us as parliamentarians to exercise vigilant oversight, thorough scrutiny, the startup fund established to ensure equal treatment and access to the funds by vulnerable countries in coping with climate disasters. Questions to ask are, will the loss and damage funds be sustainable, but do not end up like the failed pledges of 2015 financial commitments? Secondly, why is contribution voluntary and bears no commitment on anyone? Thus, will it be sustainable long-term? And lastly, how will it be replenished if some form of mandatory obligation is not factored in? The IPU, a key player, is assisting parliaments globally, developing tools to strengthen well-informed scrutiny and very soon conclusion of a climate change case study. I encourage you to leverage these resources to enhance oversight mechanisms within your parliamentary framework. Parliamentarians, our commitments to effective oversight in climate change legislation must extend beyond our parliamentary chambers. It is a multifaceted connection that links citizens and communities to national legislations and global level agreements. Recognizing the importance of public engagement in this process is very crucial. The IPU is gathering case studies and best practices on public engagement, offering insights and lessons from parliaments. I encourage you to access and contemplate these resources to enrich citizen involvement within your parliamentary framework. History is in the making. We are in the green zone for the first time. Let us further write history today by ensuring that outcome paper of COP28 include in the text parliamentary consultation to legitimize our presence as representative of the people, as an important stakeholder where it matters in the future COPs events. In conclusion, as we wrap up our discussions of COP28, let us recommit ourselves with heightened dedication to the vital task of parliamentary oversight. This commitment is not only a pledge to steer our governments towards the effective implementation of the Paris Agreement, but also a promise to safeguard the interests of the vulnerable communities and countries most profoundly affected by climate change. Let us just not see 1.5 degrees Celsius as an aspiration, but as a must collective responsibility to deal with the looming crisis. As we leave this parliamentary meeting today, let's carry forward a collective commitment to fostering inclusive and impactful climate action with a much-determined collective parliamentary oversight central role in ensuring global NDCs are not only pledges on paper, but get the necessary support by ensuring that clear and appropriate policies and strategies are in place to meet targets, supported by model laws with a pathway to reduce fossil fuel, upscaling of financing, and upscaling of renewable energy usage for a more resilient and sustainable future for all. Last but not least, calling for fast-tracking of the loss and damage fund with simplified access criteria and process, fairness, and justice in allocation. I thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that demonstrated climate action and those very important points. You mentioned multifaceted public engagement and the need for resources. So I come bearing an offer to all parliamentarians here. The state of Hawaii, where I currently live, is the first state in the United States to commit to 100% renewable energy. And we have a partnership funded by Henk Rogers of Tetris fame, through the Blue Planet Alliance, and Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, for those parliaments that are ready and prepared to commit to 100% renewable energy by 2045, to come to Hawaii and to learn from the experience there, all expenses paid, to include a representative from civil society, hopefully youth or a woman leader, and also the energy sector. So for those of you who are interested, we will be talking more about it at the subsequent Blue Zone event on women and youth parliamentarians that begins at 5:30 tonight. Please come and see me there or here, or ask the Secretariat of the Inter-Parliamentary Union for more information. We know how important it is for you to be supported with the resources that you need. So we're delighted to offer that. We're also now very pleased to open the floor. We have 15 interventions to come. The first being the representative from Parliament of Brazil, and the second from the Republic of Korea. Brazil. Brazil has had to go to the airport, so Republic of Korea, you are on. If Republic of Korea is not yet ready, we have the United Kingdom
We are
next
ready.
on the list. Oh, you do?
Excuse me, we are ready.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Distinguished delegates, I am Jung Young, a member of National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. I am very honored to have the opportunity to speak to congresspersons who lead the future of the world in parliamentary meeting at COP28. The world is now suffering from disasters such as floods, heat waves, and cold waves triggered by increasing climate change. Over the period of 10 years, from 2012 to 2021, Korea experienced roughly $2.6 billion worth of damage from climate change, induced typhoon and floods. To recover the damage, we had to invest $7.8 billion, which was way more than what we lost. Recognizing the urgency the climate crisis demands, the Korean National Assembly has been taking various legislative efforts over many years. In 2010, the National Assembly of Republic of Korea adopted the Framework Act on low carbon green growth to mandate the government to set a national emission reduction target and monitor its progress. In 2012, we passed the Act on the allocation and trading of greenhouse gas emission permits to introduce a cost-effective emission trading system. In March this year, we revised the 2021 Act on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth in response to climate crisis to lay the legal foundation for mainstreaming the voice of the future generation as they are the actual victims of climate injustice. We also revised the laws regarding public finance and accounting to adopt emission-sensitive budget system which analyses and measures the climate implications of national budget and funds. In addition, as part of our public awareness campaign for climate action and sustainable development for the future generations, a special committee on climate crisis has been convened throughout the 4 terms of the National Assembly of Republic of Korea since 25. distinguished delegates to ensure the effectiveness of the 1992 UN Framework Convention on Climate Changes and the 2015 Paris Agreement. Parliaments have to play a very important role as we have legislative and budgeting rights. I truly hope that our discussion today can lead to practical state policies to solidify binding action. Let's work together for our common goals.
Thank you very much, Republic of Korea. And I now call on the United Kingdom. May I ask you to remain within the 2-minute window because we do need to finish on time this evening. Thank you.
Fellow parliamentarians, parliamentary oversight and scrutiny of COP28 is now more essential and important than ever before. Why? Because at this COP, for the first time, the text of the global stocktake will be published. The Paris Agreement at the moment is silent on what the nature of the delivery and implementation of the next steps will be. So it is essential for all parliamentarians from all countries to step up and ensure that that final text that is published next week is scrutinised in our own national parliaments. And I would call on all parliamentarians to come forward and to call a debate in their own assemblies to allow all members of their parliaments to have that opportunity to scrutinise what is published at COP28 and the global stocktake. We must also utilise all the tools that are available to us, including our select committees. We have 2 specific select committees now in the British Parliament that focus on scrutinising and holding our executive to account. I'm delighted to be joined in the British delegation by Philip Dunn, the chair of the Environmental Audit Committee. And I established a review of net zero as the former energy minister that signed net zero into law, that called for an additional committee, the Net Zero and Energy Security Committee, which is also now scrutinising our net zero legislation. And finally, I would also urge, when it comes to working in Parliament together, that we recognise that action on climate change must be cross-party. This is too important to find false political divides. I'm delighted to be joined on the UK delegation by both Labour, Conservative and Scottish National Party members, and I hope that all of us, regardless of the makeup of our assemblies, can seek to work together in harmony next year to be able to deliver on the outcomes of COP28. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next 2 speakers will be from Egypt and Azerbaijan. Egypt, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. الحقيقة في البداية يعني أنا بشكر دولة الإمارات على الإعداد الجيد وعلى حسن الاستقبال والضيافة، وده مش غريب عليها، وأتمنى كل نجاح لهذا المؤتمر القيم واللي يعد استكمال الحقيقة لمرحلة جديدة من التفاعلات والأفكار النيرة اللي احنا بنخاطب بها العالم بلغة جديدة، وخصوصا دور البرلمانات موضوع هذا السيشن. دعوني في البداية أقول له أنا حضرت الحقيقة يمكن ال4 مؤتمرات اللي فاتوا في كوبنهاجن وباريس وشرم الشيخ والنهارده هنا. هي الحقيقة أحاديث مطولة، وفي نهاية المؤتمر الحقيقة في بعض الالتزامات من دول، لكن الحقيقة لما نيجي وده يمكن ده اللي سمعناه النهارده شفنا إن معظم الالتزامات ما كانتش بتتم بالكامل، وده يمكن يجب إن احنا يعني نتوقف أمامه ونقول ليه؟ لأن عدم وجود التزام الحقيقة دولي بخطة طريق واضح قوي إنه بيخلي حتى عملية المراقبة والمتابعة تكاد تكون معدومة. فأنا أول مقترح عاوز أتكلم عنه النهارده كيف يمكن أن يكون هناك اتفاقية ملزمة بخطة طريق توافق عليها كل الأطراف عشان نبدأ نقيم بعد كده، وبيكون للبرلمانيين دور ان هم يقدروا فعلا يقيموا ايه اللي حصل وايه اللي ناقص ومين اللي مقصر ومين اللي مجدي في العملية الأولانية. الحقيقة يعني أنا شايف ان هذا المقترح يجب أن يدرس جيدا، ويجب أن يكون التزام من الحكومات على هذا الموضوع، ويجب أيضا أن نضع فيه الأولويات وأن نضع في خريطة التاريخ مين اللي هيقوم بالعمليات دي كلها، وأن يكون، وأنا أرحب بالفكرة اللي قيلت دلوقتي، أن يكون هناك لجنة برلمانية للرقابة على كل هذه الأعمال على المستوى الدولي. أما فيما يتعلق بالموضوعات الأخرى الخاصة بالمناخ والتغيرات في تأمين الطاقة، الحقيقة في ديبيت كبير جدا النهارده بيتكلموا على الوقود الاحفوري وتواجده، وهل يكفي النهارده عمليه التحول في الفتره المستقبليه القليله انها تكفي الانتقال الكامل والامن. احنا شايفين النهارده لو بصينا للاحصائيات اللي بتقول ان كل المحاولات اللي حصلت على مستوى العالم النهارده لا تتعدى اكثر من 20% الطاقه النظيفه والمتجدده، اما 80 ما زالت الطاقه التقليديه سواء كانت الوقود الاحفوري او الفحم ما زالت موجوده. هل هذا الكم المطلوب تغييره هل كافي في السنوات دي؟ وكم هو الاموال المرصوده؟ كل ده اتحسب، لكن الحقيقه الاهم من ده ان هذه الاموال الكبيره المطلوبه صعب جدا توفرها. وخلينا نكون بمنتهى الصراحه، حتى من الدول الصناعيه الكبرى اللي هم 20 دوله كبيره اللي هي بتتحمل مسؤوليه 80% من الانبعاثات، النهارده احنا شايفين القدر اللي بتدفعه عشان تقدر تمول عمليات تخفيض الانبعاث الحراري او حتى مساعده الدول الناميه ما زال محدود. اذا انا بتكلم النهارده على اهم حته في كيفيه خلق نوعيه جديده من الاستثمارات. هنا بقى بنعمل وين وين سيتويشن ما بين الدول المتقدمه والناميه، ان احنا نفكر في تحفيز بقوانين وتشريعات جديده تحفز الدول المتقدمه براس مالها وتكنولوجياتها ان تتوطن في البلاد الناميه بمشروعات جديده. انا الحقيقه بحييكم وعاوز اذكركم جميعا انما نعود الى اوطاننا هيكون في سؤال لكل برلماني عربي او مسلم: ماذا عن فلسطين؟ وماذا يحدث اليوم هناك؟ وماذا أنتم فاعلون له؟ أنا أرجو أن يكون هناك نداء عالميا من البرلمان الدولي يقول للفلسطينيين ويقول للإسرائيليين: كفوا عن القتل، كفوا عن الدمار الذي يؤثر تأثيرا مباشرا على البيئة وعلى التغير المناخي، وعودوا إلى طاولة المفاوضات للحديث بوجود. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wish we had time for longer interventions, but we do need to stick to the 2 minutes. So thank you very much. We now have the Parliament of Azerbaijan and then Mexico, please. Azerbaijan? Mexico? Next is Thailand. And after Thailand, Indonesia. Thank you.
Madam Chair, honorable colleagues, I am Dr. Ampon Jindawathana, Senator, delegation from Thailand Parliament. Apart from climate-related institutional, financial and policy reform, the next step for Thailand is our intention to be the leader of clean energy provider in ASEAN region, with further increase of the 2037 targets of renewable energy to 50% by 2050 in order to meet the new target goals. The question for Parliament, we have one important question in relation to climate justice that we wish to propose to the distinguished panel is that how can national parliaments and parliamentarians, through their oversight, budgeting, and policy and legislative making mandate, play their part in climate governance by supporting or influencing their respective governments to promote a just transitions to clean energy, which involve
phase down and fade out, as well as increasing to share reliable and affordable green energy that backed by concrete action rather than empty rhetoric and promises, while trying not to leave some groups behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thailand. Next speakers, Indonesia and then Poland. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, distinguished delegate, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Putu Supadma Rudana, a member of Indonesian House from Bali. Thank you for the opportunity to convey the Indonesian House perspective on the importance of parliamentary oversight on the Paris Agreement implementation. Indonesia, the fourth most populous country in the world, with at least 280 million population people, with more than 17,000 islands, and of course including many small-sized islands, also badly affected by the climate crisis. I would like to share several matters regarding this topic. First, through legislation function, Parliament can support and ensure the synchronization and harmonization of numerous sectoral legislation connected to climate change, such as those in forestry, agriculture, plantation, and energy. Second, through the budgeting function, it should be underlined that the gap between the need for the climate financing and the availability of public monies remains significant. Through budget support and efficient and effective climate financing coordination, Parliament may push the administration to ensure the plan for attaining NDC targets is implemented. Third, in exercising its monitoring function, especially in terms of openness and accountability, Parliaments need to ensure that policies are in accordance with the Paris Agreement's mandate. Fourth, Parliament should also closely engage with local communities in the advocacy to ensure that indigenous values and local wisdoms on environment are included in regional government policies. In my case, I work very closely time to time with provincial government in my constituent to ensure this. The fifth one, last but not least, of course, all parties must work together, move forward together, especially Parliament under the support and assistance of the IPU, to fight climate change with, of course, climate action and, of course, implementation together. Let's take action now, collectively and collaboratively in partnership together. It's time to unite, act, and deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Indonesia. Next, we have Poland, followed by Cambodia.
Thank you. Gabriela Morawska-Stanecka, member of the Senate of the Republic of Poland. It's clear that parliaments have a monitoring role. In this respect, I hope for a major change in Poland, where power is currently being transferred to the former opposition. Combating climate change is one of the priorities of the new ruling coalition. We agree that it's crucial to increase the share of renewable energy sources in electricity generation. We believe that we can make it by using our potential of onshore and offshore wind energy, solar energy, and biogas plants. We fully support the position of the European Union in this regard. However, there is another area where national parliaments can and should be more active: the climate education. At COP28 in Lima, the Declaration of Education and Awareness Raising was adopted on the initiative of Poland, among others. This instrument also serves as a tool for the implementation of Article 6 of the Convention. The implementation of climate action is influence on society. A change of habits is necessary, mainly in developed countries. It cannot be achieved without the public support for climate action. We can only be successful in this respect if proper climate education is offered, aimed at the largest population possible. Parliaments have a special role here. They can organize events and draw attention to the climate change. They can contribute to raising public awareness. In conclusion, I'd like to emphasize that, in my opinion, Parliament can and should play two roles in the implementation of the Paris Agreement. On the one hand, to fulfill a monitoring function, and in the other hand, to link those in power and the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Poland. Will be next speaker, Cambodia, followed by Canada.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, we Cambodian parliaments understand that now in the area of loss and endemic climate impact spiraling out of control across the world. The increasing intensity and frequency of extreme weather events are going beyond our ability to adapt. Day by day, change to our river ecosystem and weather system, crippling life and livelihood and economy. We are deeply concerned about the impact of loss and endemic on community across the world. And now is the time to take urgent action. To respect this concern, we Cambodians have adopted law that were set out to be followed in order to strengthen, modernize, harmonize, and improve the management of environment protection, conservation, and restoration of natural resources, biodiversity, and ecosystem function toward a sustainable and developing living standard in the Kingdom of Cambodia. Furthermore, the real government of Cambodia pledges to support policy to reduce emission in line with the 1.5°C temperature goal by urgently introducing and enforcement of our government policy to take action to implement the following. Number one, to cancel 700 MW coal-fired local power plants to be replaced by LNG power plants. Two, to produce 1,000 MW of clean electricity before 2028 by developing new dams. Three, to increase renewable energy across the country, mostly solar energy, hydropowers, and wind power up to 70%. Four, to abandon dam project across the down system of Mekong River. Five, to abandon the coal-fired power plant development in Cambodia. Number six, to reduce plastic bag pollution of more than 3 million. Cambodian committed to reducing the use of plastic bag and expanding the movement to become more traditional. Seven, to expand forest cover area by 60% in 2050 by planting at least 1 million trees per year and strengthening protect area management. Number eight, to operationalize a fit for proposed loss and endemic fund at COP28. Number nine, to support the joint declaration of sustainable food system, agriculture, climate action was officially announced at COP28 in Dubai on 1st December 2023. Again, we stand in solidarity with people all over the world facing climate impact, and will use our respective position to ensure the full spectrum of need being met accordingly through the effective and full utilization of loss and endemic fund at COP28. And we thank you again for your inviting us here, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Cambodia. And now to conclude our statements from the floor, Canada.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Désirée Magra, avec la délégation canadienne, mais élue du Québec, qui fait maintenant partie coprésident du Beyond Oil and Gas. Et c'est le seul gouvernement subnational avec autres. Alors, c'est la première fois que je participe. J'ai été élue il y a 1 an. Donc, je voulais souligner un peu les démarches au niveau du Québec. I also just want to say that I was involved at the first Rio Earth Summit as a youth ambassador appointed by Morris Strong. So here I am 30 years later, we're still working on these issues. And I went into active politics for the next generation to get more done and work with young people in partnership rather than passing the buck or paying lip service, to work with them and empower them and try to counter some of the anxiety, anger, and apathy that many young people feel by looking not just at problems, but at solutions. So in terms of solutions in Quebec, some of the things that we're doing, we have completely ruled out further oil and gas exploration. We're in a new national action plan in terms of renewable energies. And I am also the opposition critic on climate, but we are working very much with the government, speaking of being transpartisan and nonpartisan, recognizing that all governments of different shades in Quebec, whether they've been federalist, separatist, or nationalist, have all been moving in the same direction to make Quebec the leader that it is today. We also have a commissioner on sustainable development under the Auditor General of Quebec that delivers annual reports. We have a Plan d'économie verte that comes out annually. And our Minister of Energy is also our Minister of Economy and Innovation and works seamlessly with the Environment and Climate Change Minister. So many of these decisions are taken at the cabinet level so that there's an integrated approach. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but I think as parliamentarians, we have a unique role to play, close to the people, holding governments to account, whether we're in office or not. And I'm very excited about many of the things I've learned today, including this database. I can't wait to get my hands on that. I have been looking for a global climate caucus, and I think I found it today. So congratulations on this work, and I look forward to participating actively in the years to come. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, and thank you to all of our esteemed interventionists from the floor. We are now going to hear from our wonderful panelists closing remarks, and we will finish right on time, beginning with Ms. Monica Orea. And Gavin, I see you're still here, but I know you needed to leave at 5 o'clock. Does this mean that you have a little extra time? Do you want to? Oh, perfect. So Gavin McCormick from Climate Trace, please, the floor is yours to give concluding remark.
Thank you. So I wanted to just mention that I am obviously not a member of parliament, but our understanding at Climate Trace is that one of the most valuable things you can do is a sense of what is going on in your country. So just wanted to mention that for anyone who is interested in knowing, for example, are you one of the 77 countries that has not submitted any emissions data to the UNFCCC since before the Paris Agreement has signed? Are you one of the many, many countries that has a little bit of missing information in your emissions reports? As you are passing laws, what has happened after those laws? Did emissions really go down? Climate Trace is a nonprofit coalition that is offering free technical support and resources to any member of parliament worldwide that is interested in using data to reduce emissions. So if you are interested in any technical support or data, you can find us at climatetrace.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gavin, and we're all very grateful for this important contribution that you're making. Now, I would like to turn to Ms. Monica Orea from the European Climate Commission.
Well, since it's just 1 minute, I'll focus on the fact that we need to be very smart about finance, very, very innovative, and therefore I really would like to invite you to think about the cycle between now and when the Paris Agreement turns 10 years because we need to show to society that it worked. And in that sense, I would really welcome more efforts to bring the ministers of finance of your countries to the Congress to have conversations about how to scale up not only the finance that comes from abroad, but the finance that is already in your countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now moving to Mr. Juan Carlos Villalonga from Globe.
Bien, trato de ser breve y contundente. Algunas cosas las han dicho. Enfrentamos 2 años por delante donde todos nuestros países van a estar discutiendo contribuciones nacionales NDC realmente restrictivas. Es mucho el trabajo que va a haber. Y creo que allí el rol de los parlamentarios es fundamental. En 3 sentidos. El primero, político, se lo dijo recién. Allí está la política en el mejor sentido de la palabra representada. Allí es donde se pueden conseguir los acuerdos políticos, los acuerdos de largo plazo, la política de Estado, y donde buena parte de la conversación pública es protagonizada por los parlamentarios. Eso me parece muy importante. En segundo lugar, lo obvio, la legislación. En buena medida, la transición energética depende de mejores marcos regulatorios, el desafío regulatorio. Nuevos marcos regulatorios para los mercados eléctricos, para la distribución de la energía, para la movilidad eléctrica. Es decir, está trazado en muchos de nuestros países la innovación regulatoria para darle el espacio a las nuevas tecnologías que están apareciendo. Y por último, también lo han dicho, nosotros como parlamentarios controlamos el presupuesto, controlamos áreas de la justicia, somos supervisores de la gestión del gobierno. Bueno, tenemos que ser supervisores en tiempo real de lo que va sucediendo en términos de cumplir con los planes nacionales, cumplir con los planes sectoriales, y eso solo los parlamentos lo pueden hacer. No es una evaluación ex post, sino que lo podemos hacer en tiempo real. Creo que esas son funciones digamos, no pueden ser reemplazados por ningún otro cuerpo. Es el Parlamento el que tiene ese rol y por lo tanto vuelvo a lo que dije al principio. Es evidente que el Parlamento, los parlamentarios tienen que tener otro estatus en estas conversaciones. Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Waven William.
I would like to thank all the participants. It was good to hear that you all know what is at stake. I would like to just say, we are in this together, so let's do it. I thank you.
What a wonderful note on which to close. I would like to thank our gracious hosts from the United Arab Emirates, to thank the President and the Secretary General and the wonderful staff from the Inter-Parliamentary Union, our brilliant speakers today, all of those who intervene from the floor, and all of you as parliamentarians who play such a critical role in this absolutely essential element of parliamentary oversight. And to close, I would like to thank our Climate Action Task Force that have helped us to produce the collection of tools, the laws, the database, and we will be coming up with a new tool with MIT that we hope to announce next year. For those who are interested in being supported to come to Hawaii to learn about 100% renewable energy, please see me later. Thank you all for the fantastic work that you are doing. Good evening.
That we reclaim, and I think also in Kenya, one of the challenges that we are facing is in rural areas, we have a lot of people that use firewood, and therefore we find our forests are depleted, the hills have been depleted, and therefore it is actually a concerted effort that we are doing as members of parliament.
أيها السادة، ما نزال منذ الصباح الباكر نحاول أن نتلمس عمق العمل البرلماني في الشأن البيئي، وأعتقد أن الجلسات الممتدة استطاعت أن ترسم ملامح هذه العلاقة وهيكلية الدور الذي ينبغي على البرلمانات الاطلاع به لتكون عامل حسم في ترجيح كافة البيئة التي تتطلع إلى تكاتف جهود البشرية لإنقاذها من التدهور الحاصل. ولكن هناك لبنة ما تزال بحاجة إلى أن نضعها مكانها في معارفنا البرلمانية البيئية، وأنا متيقن أن جلسة الطريق أمام العمل البرلماني بشأن تغير المناخ كفيلة بأن تضع هذه اللبنة الأخيرة. أدعو الآن مدير هذه الجلسة سعادة السيد مروان عبيد المهيري، عضو المجلس الوطني الاتحادي في دولة الإمارات، إلى اعتلاء المنصة مشكورة.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. Dear parliamentarians, speakers of parliaments, parliamentarians, distinguished guests. It's a pleasure for me to moderate this session, the closing session of this parliamentary meeting at COP28, on the road ahead for parliamentary action on climate change. Today has been an undeniably important day for parliamentary action on climate change. Hundreds of parliamentarians, which is unprecedented for this type of events, have gathered here to chart a course forward to confront climate change and join hands with negotiators and decision makers at the Blue Zone in Expo City to address and confront the issue of climate change. In this closing session, we will mark an important step in our deliberations by hearing from the rapporteur of the outcome document of the parliamentary meeting at COP28. I would like now to invite the rapporteur, Ms. Mira Suedi, member of the Federal National Council of the United Arab Emirates, to present the outcome document. Mira, please take the floor.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellencies, esteemed parliamentarians, good evening. My name is Mira Al-Suedi. I'm a member of the Federal National Council at the United Arab Emirates, and I am rapporteur responsible for the drafting of the Parliamentary Meeting outcome document for COP28. Today, I am proud and excited to stand before you as we unveil not just a document, but a bold call to action. The Parliamentary Meeting outcome document of COP28. It is a true testament to our collective commitment to tackle the urgent global challenge of climate change. This outcome document is not just a compilation of words. It is an action-oriented plan, echoing the urgency articulated in the Paris Agreement and the NASA Doha Declaration, acknowledges that we are progressing and must act urgently and boldly to limit global warming. While creating this document, we embraced the spirit of inclusivity and collaboration that characterizes COP28 as it is, recognizing the diverse perspectives within our global parliamentary community. The IPU and the Federal National Council worked diligently to ensure that the draft is not only comprehensive, but also reflective of the many varied voices within our community. And we facilitated ample feedback from all members. In terms of the process, I created a preliminary draft of the document, and it was shared with IPU members on the 13th of October 2023. The draft underwent discussion by the IPU Standing Committee on Sustainable Development in Luanda, Angola, during the assembly on 25 October 2023. And it was open to further amendments until mid-November 2023. This additional layer of consultation ensured that we incorporated a wide array of viewpoints and expertise into the final draft. We received amendments from a few parliaments, which we incorporated to the best of our ability within the final text. So now let me turn to the content of this outcome document. First, let me say that it is a testament to our consultative process, the parliamentary community's commitment to effective climate change and action, and the recognition that our response to climate change needs to be as diverse as the challenge itself. Colleagues, this document calls for immediate and bold action. It calls on us for us to use our legislative powers to push and work with our governments to update and strengthen NDCs, emphasizing common but differentiated responsibilities. It calls on us to leverage our parliamentary oversight and budgeting powers to align national policies with global commitments, all while prompting public participation, education, and awareness. The document also places particular attention to the need to advocate for impactful international cooperation, emphasizing technology transfer, capacity building, and knowledge sharing. Pioneering innovative financing mechanisms, championing inclusive climate strategies, and extending support to developing nations are imperative in our climate efforts. It is fundamental that we address the finance gap, push for global financial reform, and strengthen cross-sectoral collaboration with governments. Colleagues, I'm very proud, and I do believe that we have a very strong document before us. I would like to suggest, given that we have received a few more comments and suggestions over the past 48 hours from certain countries, that in order for us to reach a consensus across the board, for me to just mention these changes now, and we can hopefully get consensus and approval on it. So there were 5 changes that were brought to us over the past 48 hours. The first change is to include a reference to the importance of meeting national set targets in preamble paragraph number 5. I hope that's acceptable. The second one is to introduce in preamble paragraph 7 a reference to parliamentary action to achieve sustainable development goals. The third is to include a reference in preamble paragraph 8 to small island developing states, in particular when talking about vulnerable states. In article number 6, when mentioning women and youth, to also add children. So these 4 proposals, I think, are very simple additions, and they do allow us to enrich the text of the document. The last change is to article number 11 in the outcome document. So for us, in order for us to allow for differentiated approaches while remaining a reference, while keeping a reference to certain terms, we suggest new article 11 to read as follows. Encourage parliaments to promote international cooperation for protective legislation connecting climate, biodiversity loss, pollution, and addressing ecocide. Thank you, colleagues, for the time. This is now the time for us to take parliamentary action. And may I have just to confirm another round of applause to collectively adopt the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Yeah, sure. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the great efforts in leading this extensive drafting and consultation process of this outcome document. I believe I have a request from Alex Sabel from UK to take the floor. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, thank you. I first want to thank Mira Al-Suwaidi as the COP rapporteur. As the COP rapporteur for Glasgow COP26, I know how much work it is to produce the outcomes document. This amendment, the last amendment, Amendment 5, is my amendment. And I just want to very briefly say that in the UK, we don't yet have an ecocide law. We have one going through our upper chamber at the moment, which I support. A UK-based company, BHP Billington, ran a mine in Brazil, the Mariana Dam. That dam failed. They knew there was structural difficulty in that dam, but compensation hasn't been given to those people in Brazil. Hundreds of thousands of people have got no livelihood. And if we pass ecocide laws, people whose lives are affected by ecocide can be compensated, although that is not sufficient. Obviously, we need to prevent it. But also those parliaments here, and I encourage all parliaments to go home and try and create ecocide law, can also say the ICC to incorporate ecocide, who are IC members of ecocide, in one of their articles alongside crimes against humanity, genocide, etc., to be prosecuted in the ICC. And this is really important now, considering the global context of climate in security and conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for staying within the 1 minute time limit. The delegation from Russia, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank Ms. Rapporteur for excellent effort she honestly made in order to have consensus document. We appreciate it. And I have only one issue with Article 11 that we are discussing, the one that was proposed by our British colleague. The problem is that the language is talking about connecting issues in a legislation that we had never discussed in this format. I was listening very carefully for today's discussion. Not a single time we discussed the idea of legislation that is being proposed in Article 11. So we are offered to adopt something we do not know what we mean, whether we agree on it or not. I agree that there are important issues that needs to be discussed in this context. Moreover, in my country, ecocide is already criminalized in law since late 90s. So it's not the problem. But what we are seeing in this text is unclear. It might be misused, including for political purposes, something that we do not believe belongs to the work that we are doing. So our delegation will dissociate from the support of this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your comments and participation is duly noted. I would like to reiterate on the importance and emphasize on the importance of a pragmatic, innovative, and holistic approach that parliamentarians need to take to tackle this problem of climate change, to ensure having sustainable, fruitful, and feasible outcomes. And now I have the honor to introduce my dear friend, Secretary General of the IPU, Mr. Martin Chankong, who will provide some closing remarks. Mr. Secretary General, please take the floor. Of course, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for giving me the floor. I do know that the day has been very long, and I hope that I can limit my concluding remarks to the bare minimum. The discussions have been so rich that I feel terrible that I am not able to do justice to all the very good ideas and suggestions, proposals that were made during this day of deliberations. But I believe that the report of the parliamentary meeting will do justice to those discussions. Let me just use this opportunity, first of all, to thank you, Mr. Moderator, for being here to see that the proceedings conclude successfully. I also want to thank Mira Al-Suwaidi for a great job. She is a true champion of the IPU. She has followed the tradition in the IP of democracy, consultation, inclusiveness, to make sure that the outcome of our deliberations reflects the general views of us all. I think that is very important, and I think we go home now claiming ownership of that outcome document and being energized to implement it. Let me also thank, again, the hosts of this event, the Federal National Council of the UAE. We see that the efforts that you have put into organizing this meeting have borne fruit. We've had very smooth deliberations today, and the outcome document is there to bear testament to the richness of the discussions. You did say, Mira, that this document is an action-oriented document. Yes, that's what I guess many of you asked for. You did ask for a roadmap, and I think somebody, my good friend Mohammed Al-Buenin, talked about a binding roadmap for us to take the work forward. Many of you did talk about the need for us now to have an accountability mechanism that would help us at the international level to monitor implementation of the commitments that have been entered into in the context of the global campaign against climate change. So I believe that the document that you have in front of you does reflect many of these suggestions and ideas, and I'm really very happy. This meeting, again, will go down in history for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is the largest ever held in the context of COP, parliamentary meeting, of course. We did register over 500 participants from over 60 countries. Congratulations to our hosts. Dubai is a very popular destination, but it is even more important the subject that was being discussed. That is why many people did show up here. And so we are very happy. Again, also, I said it's a historic moment for us because, as has been said by many speakers, this is the first time that we're meeting in the heart of COP. This is the first time that we are part of the action in the very heart of COP. And I will just want to say, as many of you have said, that this should be the first, but not the end of it all. This should just be the beginning of a process for parliaments to be more deeply involved in the workings of COP. And I want to say that the future hosts of COP meetings are put on notice that parliaments will no longer go unnoticed when it comes to deliberations at COP sessions. So that is one thing that I take away today. During the discussions, you all mentioned the fact that implementation of our commitments internationally and nationally is lagging, and that we need more robust action to take the climate campaign to a higher level, a more effective level. I think that this is something that parliaments are very keen, from what I heard today, to do. And one specific issue that came up time and again was this need to be lucid about the national determined contributions. We need to make sure that our governments are implementing what they have signed up to, but you have even said that these contributions should be scaled up in view of the magnitude of the challenge that is facing us. So this is one thing that I take home with me, but also I take home with me, and I believe many of you take home with you, the insistence on climate justice. The loss and damage fund that has been established is a good beginning. You did hail the operationalization of that fund, but you also said that it has to be fair, it has to be accessible, and there should be a monitoring mechanism to make sure that it is achieving the objective for which it has been established. Of course, you talked about sustainability. You raised issues regarding how this fund will be replenished, how it will be distributed, and in what way. But then you also mentioned in particular that this fund should go primarily to the vulnerable communities, to those marginalized communities that are most adversely affected by climate change. And here I want to say that following the suggestions that have been made here, special emphasis has been laid in the outcome document on the plight of the small island developing states. I think this is something that is important. If we do not pay particular attention to them, they may just fall in between the cracks, not to say they'll just go under the sea. So it is something that I took away from this meeting. I also took away from your discussions that, yes, you are aware, fully aware of the magnitude and scope of climate change. But parliaments are coming to grips with this. Many of your statements were replete with examples of good practice, what you are doing as parliaments and parliamentarians to help the global effort to combat climate change. This is very reassuring indeed, and the idea is now to scale that up to make sure that we continue to share experiences across the board, and that is why the point that was made, I think, during the last session about collaboration and partnerships resonates very well with the IPU. We should be working together and not against each other or separately in silos. This is something that requires coordinated action at the global level, especially with parliaments. So this is something that I would like us to take home with us. Of course, when we come to such gatherings, we say a lot of things that parliaments want to do, what they should be doing, how they are challenged, but we always do not pay much attention to the issue of whether or not parliaments are in a position to carry out their commitments. Of course, there are many out there that have the resources, have the skills, knowledge to implement what they have been elected to do. But many are struggling, and that is why I think many of you referred to the need to provide more resources to parliaments to build their capacities, to make tools available to them so that they can perform their duties when it comes to contributing to climate action. And I was very heartened by the suggestion that was made by the moderator of the previous session here, Amanda Ellis, of the various tools that are out there already, the LSC database of climate-related legislation, you had the global emissions tracking tool that has been developed that can be very useful for parliamentarians. And at the level of the IPU, you did hear the president of the Committee on Sustainable Development talk about the work that the IPU has been doing to build capacity among parliaments, to provide tools for them to perform their work more efficiently. I just want to, on behalf of the organization and co-host of this meeting, I want to say that we stand committed to continuing our support to parliaments by providing the tools, providing guidance, providing platforms such as this one for us to bounce off ideas among us, exchange experience and good practice, and come up with coalitions and alliances for the way forward at the level of parliaments. We want to do this in a spirit of partnership with parliaments, partnership with experts, partnerships with donors and international agencies such as the UNFCCC. We need to work together to build a strong coalition in support of climate action. So I just want to conclude by saying that I commend the outcome document onto your hands. It is not a piece of paper that you simply put in your pocket and put in the next dustbin. It should be, I believe, your marching orders. Take it home, make sure that you roll it out, you disseminate it among your colleagues, you have a good discussion of this in the parliament, and why not come up with that roadmap that Mohammed mentioned that will allow us to work together. Amanda Ellis did say, and many of you did say, that the road after, what is it called? Dubai, COP27, is going to be a long and arduous one. It would be compelling on all of us to work even harder to live up to the expectations that have arisen out of COP28. All hands should be on deck. We should work together as a global community. We should be part of the process and not on the sidelines of the process. And as somebody was saying, there is a commitment. There is a commitment. There is determination. From what I've heard today here, parliamentarians are not going to just sit back and be spectators in this global jamboree of climate activists. You want to be part and parcel of that, and you want to make sure that your parliamentary oversight role is played to the fullest to make sure that commitments entered into by governments are actually implemented at the national level. Let me finish by echoing what Waven Williams said. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. We're in one boat, and we have to do something about that boat. Let's just go and do it. I think there are solutions out there that we all know, and let's start with those solutions and see how we advance. Thank you very much. I wish you, for those of you staying back, the rest of very successful deliberations at COP, but I wish you success as you go back home to carry the spirit of this parliamentary meeting and Dubai as a whole with you for the betterment of our planet. Thank you very much. And do I declare the meeting closed, or you want to do it? Okay.
Go ahead.
So with the moderator's permission, I want to, both of us, we want to declare closed this parliamentary meeting, and we hope to see you next year. But when we meet next year, it has to be an opportunity for us to celebrate progress.
We'll get to know by the end of next week.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much.
شكرا على حسن استماعكم وعلى أمل اللقاء بكم مجددا. هذه تحياتي والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.